Chapter 227, Submission. The other 7 men with pale faces could clearly sense Jian Chen's intent on killing them. If Jian Chen was only just able to kill Tianqiong Lai, they would be shocked, but the method on how he did it had completely terrified them to a dizzying amount. When Jian Chen had so easily stabbed through Tianqiong Daoyun's saint weapon, it had demonstrated that if he wanted, Jian Chen could easily kill the 7 great saint masters with as much ease as stepping on an ant. Although a saint weapon was a man's weapon, it also symbolized their connection with their life. If their saint weapon broke, then they would die. Even if they were unfortunate enough to live, they would be no better than a cripple. Right in front of their eyes was solid proof that Jian Chen could easily destroy their saint weapons without trouble. Just thinking about how they were walking the narrow line between life or death had truly shocked them deep to their core. By now, the 7 of them had lost their fighting spirit and could only look at Jian Chen with a different expression than before, but still mixed onto their faces was a great deal of fear. "Stop. Fellow brother, please stay your hand." Seeing how Jian Chen was staring at them with a look full of malice, one of the elders hurriedly called out to him while reabsorbing his saint weapon into his body as if showing his unwillingness to be Jian Chen's enemy. Then Jian Chen snorted, "Be lenient to you? What a funny thing to hear. Just a moment ago I had told you to not get involved, but you ended up involving yourself anyways, so don't blame me." Jian Chen's words had caused the 7 to look afraid for a moment before the elder who had spoken up before said once more, "Junior, this is nothing more than a misunderstanding. We aren't from the Tianqiong clan and were only invited by them. Today, if you let us go, we will not be able to thank you enough." "That's right, Junior, if you let us go today, we will truly thank you from the bottom of our hearts." The other elder spoke quickly. At this critical juncture that would decide their life, both elders had already thrown away their high noble status for a better chance of survival. Jian Chen's method of killing Tianqiong Daoyun had already made their defenses absolutely useless. In their eyes, just protecting their lives today would be a higher priority than anything else. Plus, more importantly, they had no grievances or hatred with Jian Chen. It was only because Tianqiong Lai had invited them that they were involved in this matter. Jian Chen continued to stare at the 7 men with a flashing eye brightly. For a moment, he was silent, but then a small smile appeared on his face. "So it's like that? Then I'll give you a chance to live." Upon hearing that, the 7 great saint masters' eyes sparkled. Despite 5 of the 7 not speaking up to protect themselves, they all had the same strong desire to live. Seeing the strong desire to live, Jian Chen's mouth began to grow wider as he spoke. "There is one condition to your survival. From today on out, you will surrender and pay your allegiance to me." The 7 men's faces suddenly started for a moment with an unsightly look. Each one went silent as an intense struggle began to happen within themselves. Knowing how the 7 weren't able to decide, Jian Chen's face went cold for a moment, but inside, he was laughing. When he had used the azure and violet sword qi to kill Tianqiong Daoyun, it was quite excessive, but he had already planned it all out. His goal was simple: by use of an overpowering amount of force, he would force the 7 into submission and eventually use that power to expand his flame mercenaries. Of course, if they continued to be pig-headed and refused to surrender, then Jian Chen would kill them without hesitation. Seeing the 7 men in front of him, Jian Chen knew that his plan was already halfway there. For now, he only had to see what the 7 would decide on. Jian Chen understood the "strike while the iron is hot" ideology, so immediately, he said, "I know you are all influential figures of Wake City with a large amount of power and face. Do not think that I am trying to humiliate you by trying to have you submit to me. It's actually the opposite. If you submit to me, then I, Jian Chen, will guarantee that your achievements in the future will be far better than your current ones. Your achievements will even soar to a previously unattainable height instead of being limited to such a small and withdrawn city like Wake City. Do not doubt my abilities." All the men suddenly looked up as if they all felt a mutual feeling between them. Although they all thought Jian Chen to be too young, his strength was so strong that they felt as if they had been left behind in the dust. This display of strength had really proved that Jian Chen's identity was not simple at all. Of course, there were even a few people within their group that were convinced that Jian Chen belonged to an extremely powerful clan. With that, the 7 men couldn't help but think that being allied with Jian Chen would not be a bad thing. In fact, it would be a tremendously big opportunity for them to go along with Jian Chen, since they wouldn't know for themselves if they would truly reach a new height of power. Fine, I am Weiss, the representative of the Dor clan. The Dor clan agrees to follow you. From today on out, my men are yours to supervise. The first elder who had spoken previously, pledged. Jian Chen couldn't help but have a happy smile on his face. I am Kai, heir of the Kai clan. From today on, my clan is yours to dispatch. The second elder spoke. Jian Chen's smile grew even wider. He hadn't thought that these 2 elders were the representatives of the Kai and Dor clan. These 2 clans were very powerful clans that, while not on the same level as the Tianxiong clan or Zhou clan in Wake City, Jian Chen had heard about before. What about you 5? Jian Chen turned to the 5 middle-aged men. The great Saint Masters could be considered to be a decent-leveled warrior on the Tian Yuan continent. So when it came to these type of people, he didn't wish for them to be killed, since aside from Ming Dong and him, the Flame Mercenaries had no one else. If he wanted the Flame Mercenaries to expand, then he would need to gather as many strong people as possible. Fine, I am willing to follow you, but I cannot guarantee if my fellow brothers will do the same. After that, the remaining 5 men all consented to follow Jian Chen as their leader. From far away, the 100 guards of the Tianxiong clan looked at Jian Chen with wide eyes as if they were watching a drama. Every man had gone silent with shock as they watched 7 of Wake City's famous figures who had initially been invited by Tianxiong Lai to fight Jian Chen all follow him. They could never believe that these 7 would be subservient to the one man who had killed Tianxiong Lai. Despite it all happening right in front of him, the 100 guards still couldn't believe their eyes. Chapter 228, Making a Name for Oneself in Battle. Jian Chen's eyes swept across the 7 great Saint Masters in front of him with a great big smile. At this moment, his heart was filled with joy, since from this moment on, his Flame Mercenaries would no longer just be a solitary group. With the introduction of these 7 great Saint Masters, the strength of the Flame Mercenaries would increase many times over. However, Jian Chen understood that these 7 men were not truly obeying him and would most likely try to betray him later. Yet this wasn't extremely important to Jian Chen, since he was only planning to use them to temporarily improve his Flame Mercenary strength. He would use them to accomplish a few mercenary missions to improve their Flame Mercenaries' grade. This method was completely exploiting the 7 great Saint Masters, but since Jian Chen had no important use for them, he would only use them for a small amount of time. Why don't you 5 introduce yourselves? Jian Chen asked the 5. With some hesitation, the 5 men looked at each other before a black-robed man spoke out. I am Seth, the leader of the hot-blooded mercenaries. I am Duo Kong, the captain of the Golden Dragon Mercenaries. I am Charkas of the Char Mercenaries. I am called Mo Tian, the leader of the Mercenaries of Slaughter. I am called Qingfeng of the Zephyr Mercenaries. The 5 men called out their names and affiliation one after another, but with each introduction Jian Chen had heard, the more he was shocked. He didn't think that these 5 would be the captains of mercenary groups. If it was like this, then he had just gained control of 5 mercenary groups and 2 very influential clans of Wake City. With this revelation, Jian Chen was satisfied with the profit he had earned today. He didn't think that a lone person like him would suddenly make a leap to become someone who controlled a good amount of power. At the same time, he was painfully aware that while this was a strong amount of power within Wake City, within the Tian Yuan continent, this was nothing major. Qingfeng of the Zephyr Mercenaries. Upon hearing the final person's name, Jian Chen's eyes revealed a look of shock. This name was the exact same name as his sword, how coincidental. Jian Chen looked deeply at the man named Xiaofan closely. This man looked to be around 40 years old and was rather skinny, like how a scholar would be. He wore a white-colored robe and his hair was draped over his shoulders, reaching down to his waist. Occasionally, the wind would blow his hair in a way that made it drift in the breeze. His eyebrows were like sharp swords and did nothing to hide the bright pair of eyes underneath that contained a lively shine to them. They gave off the feeling that his stares could pierce into someone as easily as a sword would. Slowly moving away from Xiaofan, Jian Chen looked at the other group of Tianqiong members. Tianqiong Lai has died. From this moment on, Wake City will no longer have a Tianqiong clan. I know many of you are guards paid for by the Tianqiong clan. Since I am in a good mood and do not wish to mercilessly kill the innocent, you may all go. Suddenly the 100 guards all were shaken out of their stupor and turned their eyes away from the 7 great saint masters and the dead bodies of the Tianqiong brothers. The entire courtyard grew deathly silent. This one thanks the hero for his kindness, this one thanks the hero for not killing us. After that, the silence was instantly broken as many people began to cry out their thanks to Jian Chen. After that was done, no one had any reluctance to stay behind and immediately left. Quickly, the 100 guards left the Tianqiong clan courtyard, leaving behind 40 people that refused to leave. Jian Chen looked at those few people with some confusion. Why haven't you left yet? Some of the men hesitated for a second before a sturdy-looking man stepped forward and looked at Jian Chen's young face. Swordsman, I wish to go with you, will you accept me? Follow me? Jian Chen had a surprised look on his face. Looking at this man, he guessed him to be around 30 years old with a good build of around 2 meters. His muscles were rather pronounced and judging from the air he carried around, Jian Chen could estimate that this man was at the Saint Master level. Jian Chen nodded his head. If you truly wish to join me, then I'll add you to the registers in a moment at the Mercenary Union. The man revealed a look of pure joy as he hurriedly said, this one will listen to fellow swordsman's words. Fellow swordsman, I too wish to join your mercenary group. Fellow swordsman, please accept me into your mercenary group as well. Soon after that, a few other mercenaries began to cry out with their pleas for Jian Chen to notice and accept them. Although Jian Chen had killed Tianqiong Lai, many of these men were merely hired by the Tianqiong clan and had no other affiliation with Tianqiong Lai. They weren't friendly with him either, and so they did not have any hard feelings over his death, nor would they attempt at getting revenge on Jian Chen. Because of their begging, Jian Chen could only admit that while these men were at the great saint level and higher with only a few saint masters, once they joined the flame mercenaries, then the group's strength would increase many times over. Jian Chen didn't know what their true aim was or if they had loyalties to someone else, but right now this wouldn't serve as a hindrance to the flame mercenaries. Right now, the mercenary group desperately needed members. When the situation with the flame mercenaries stabilized, only then would Jian Chen clean the group of its tumors. Aside from Tianqiong Lai and Tianqiong Daoyun, are there any other men? Jian Chen looked at the 40 remaining men and asked. As Jian Chen asked his question, the first man that had pledged to follow Jian Chen had immediately spoke up. Tianqiong Lai had 3 wives who all live in the back of the courtyard. Please wait one moment, fellow swordsman, and I will bring them out immediately. With that, he immediately ran to the back of the courtyard. Soon after, a few quick-minded people suddenly saw a good opportunity to get on the good side of Jian Chen and immediately ran after the man. After seeing these men leave for the back of the courtyard, the remaining 40 men suddenly went dark as though they realized they just missed out on a good opportunity. Just looking at the men disappear into the back of the courtyard, the men had a dark killing intent in their eyes. Jian Chen looked at those men and couldn't help but have a small cold smile on his face. From their expressions, Jian Chen instantly took note of it and their faces, but he didn't do anything about it. To him, these men could be exploited later and could be expended at a moment's notice when their value dropped. Let go of me. Release me now. Soon the fearful cries of a few women could be heard as the group of men that had left earlier came back with 3 women in the middle of them. Out of the 3 of them, 2 were around 30 years old while the last one looked to be around 20 years old with a rather pretty appearance. Fellow swordsmen, these 3 are the wives of Tianxiong Lai. 2 of them have been with him for many years while the younger-looking one has only been married to Tianxiong Lai for 2 years. Before Jian Chen could even ask, the first man introduced them. Jian Chen nodded his head with satisfaction toward this man's work. He hadn't thought that this burly man would be so meticulous. The 3 women were deathly pale as if they had lost all blood circulation in their faces. The moment they saw the dead bodies of Tianxiong Lai and Tianxiong Daoyun, they all went silent with extreme shock. The man looked at Jian Chen's face as he held his axe at the neck of one of the women. Fellow swordsmen, since these 3 are Tianxiong Lai's wives, should we kill them? Don't kill me. Please don't kill me, the 3 women instantly cried out in terror from that question. As if they knew that Jian Chen was the one responsible for this, they all looked pitifully at Jian Chen's figure as their sparkling teardrops began to flow from their eyes like a river. Seeing how desperate these 3 women were, Jian Chen could only sigh before waving his hand. Okay, let them go. Against these 3 women who couldn't even resist, Jian Chen didn't care. After all, he wasn't a cold-blooded person. Yes, swordsman. They had no objections to Jian Chen's words and immediately released the woman from their grasps and their weapons. Afterward, Jian Chen took the large group of people and left the Tianxiong clan's courtyard. The matter regarding the Tianxiong clan could be said to have met a spectacular ending. The establishment of the Tianxiong clan hadn't been created that long ago and couldn't compete with the 100-year-old histories of many of the other clans. So the true pillars of the clan's strength were Tianxiong Lai and Tianxiong Daoyun. The news of the Tianxiong clan's extermination quickly made its way around Wake City and shocked it to its core. This piece of information had been even bigger than when the Zhou clan was exterminated. After everyone found out that the Tianxiong clan had been killed off, Jian Chen's name had quickly soared to prominence so that practically no one in the city did not know him and everyone knew of his deeds. In the time span of 2 days, Jian Chen had destroyed the Zhou mercenaries and Zhou clan before then destroying the Tianxiong clan. Not only that, but he had then subdued 2 clan elders and 5 captains of their own respective mercenary groups. With this shocking piece of information, absolutely no one could believe it at first. Chapter 229, Rise in Power. Jian Chen led the 40 men to the mercenary union in the heart of Wake City with plans to add them all to his flame mercenaries. Fellow swordsmen, how should we call you in the future? A man asked Jian Chen. Call me Jian Chen for now. When you are all in my mercenary group, then you will call me captain. Jian Chen spoke evenly before turning back to the first man who had pledged himself to him. I still don't know your name. Upon hearing that, the man laughed heartily. I am called Xiong Tai, but captain can call me De Xiong instead. Jian Chen nodded his head lazily as he looked at the other 5 captains. Have you figured out how to deal with your mercenary groups yet? The 5 men all hesitated for a moment before Duo Kong answered, since we are planning to go with you, then this matter should be resolved by you. Jian Chen narrowed his eyes as he thought for a moment. After we get there, you will bring all your mercenaries there. Whichever mercenaries that are willing to follow me will join our flame mercenaries, whichever that aren't willing can go. However, those with a stronger amount of power than the others should be asked to stay behind for me to look at, understood? Understood. The 5 answered immediately. Then, Jian Chen paused for a moment before speaking to them once more. I know that you are unwilling to disband your mercenary groups, but do not worry. To follow me is to walk the right path in life. In the future, our flame mercenaries will definitely shock the entire Tian Yuan continent. With that, Jian Chen's eyes emitted a bright glow of light as he vowed to make his plans come true. When his words landed upon the ears of the others, they had all thought it to be a joke. No one there treated it seriously. For an unknown mercenary group to want to become a super mercenary group that could shock the Tianyuan continent? These men were experienced with the long and arduous road of life. They knew that with the current strength of the flame mercenaries, the distance separating them and Jian Chen's goal was almost endless. Captain, what about our Dor and Kai clan? Although our clans aren't all that weak, but our strengths isn't well developed in the martial arts section. Both of our clans focuses on other affairs, and if we were to reallocate ourselves to being like a mercenary group, then that would damage us tremendously. Kai Er asked. Hearing that, even Jian Chen went silent. Kai Er's words had merit to them. The Kai and Dor clan were strong on some level, but they were both clans that were built on commercial business. After years of development, they had gained a huge role in Wake City's market. If that were dissolved, then their years of hard work and arduous labors would be lost without a chance of regaining it. Jian Chen pondered this for a good while before finally coming to a conclusion that the two clans should commit to their original growth. Both Weiss and Kai Er would be the overseers to the operations of their clan, but in the end, Jian Chen would be the ultimate puppeteer behind the scenes. As the large group of people walked through the streets in a wave-like manner, the passers-by couldn't help but look at them. 7 of the men there were prestigious members of Wake City and would seldom be seen out in public. Many people recognized who they were and began to talk among themselves about what was happening. Before they got onto the street with the mercenary union, Jian Chen and the 5 captains split ways. Then, with the remaining members from the Tianxiong clan guards and the 2 elders, Jian Chen entered the union. Within the mercenary union, there were a total of 43 guards and the 2 great Saint Master elders who then underwent a few procedures and became official members of the Flame Mercenaries. Within these 43 people, there were unexpectedly 16 Saint Masters. The remaining 27 were all at the Great Saint level. With these people and the 7 Great Saint Master experts, it could be said without exaggeration that the previously unknown and small-scaled Flame Mercenaries had become one of the strongest powers in Wake City almost instantly. Although the amount of strength the Flame Mercenaries could utilize had exploded instantly, the rank of the mercenary group was still at the C rank. If they wanted to increase their ranking, they would have to accomplish many missions first. After all the procedures were done, Jian Chen led the entire group out of the mercenary union when suddenly Jian Chen heard a loud sound call out to him. "Brother Jian Chen, I've finally found you." Jian Chen immediately stopped moving forward out of the mercenary union and then subconsciously turned to look in the direction of the call. As he turned his head, he saw the man who he had only just separated from 2 days ago. Hudolf, the captain of the Loyal Spirit Mercenaries, came running up to him. Arriving at Jian Chen's side, Hudolf had a look of surprise at all of the people behind him but immediately turned back to look at Jian Chen. "Brother Jian Chen, if I may be so bold to ask, but perhaps you could agree to my request?" Smiling, Jian Chen replied to him, "Captain Hudolf, speak whatever it is on your mind." When it came to Hudolf, Jian Chen had a rather favorable opinion of him and so he was polite to the man. "Brother Jian Chen, I wish to join your mercenary group and travel with you from today on forward. Will you agree to my request?" Hudolf was rather embarrassed as he spoke. He was already 50 years old, yet he was asking to wander around the continent with a 20-year-old. Truly this was an awkward question for him to ask. Hearing the words of Hudolf, Jian Chen was utterly surprised. This request of his was something that Jian Chen had not expected. Despite feeling shocked in his heart, Jian Chen quickly calmed himself down. So even Captain Hudolf wishes to travel with me around the Tianyuan continent? Then this one would be honored to have you, but Captain Hudolf, how will you deal with the Loyal Spirit Mercenaries? After you left yesterday I've already made my peace with the Loyal Spirit Mercenaries. My captain position has already been given to a capable brother to uphold, meaning that I am no longer a part of the Loyal Spirit Mercenaries. Pointing behind him, he introduced 5 men that stood close by. These 5 men you've seen before. They are my brothers and left the Loyal Spirit Mercenaries with me in hopes that we could travel with brother Jian Chen once more. Hyudolf's eyes looked distant as he thought back to when Jian Chen had easily killed that war beast. With so much power at such a tender young age pointed out that Jian Chen was anything but ordinary. So after consideration, Hyudolf had decided to abandon the dozen years of hard work he had put to become the leader of the loyal spirit mercenaries and instead became a follower of Jian Chen. Jian Chen looked at the 5 people behind Hyudolf. These 5 weren't unfamiliar at all, they were the Saint Master experts from the loyal spirit mercenaries. Jian Chen wouldn't decline their request to join his flame mercenaries and immediately led the 6 in to deal with the official procedures to join the flame mercenaries as 6 new capable Saint Masters. At this moment, the heavily armored Commander Duoli came into view with 2 guards at his side. Immediately walking up to Jian Chen, he cupped his hands together and smiled, "Brother Jian Chen, the Lord wishes for you to come up to his mansion for a small talk regarding some important matters." Chapter 230, Class 5 Magical Beast. The invitation of Wake City's Lord was something that Jian Chen couldn't reject. Plus, he still had something important that the Lord Yunli could help with. "Commander Duoli, please wait for me to finish up my affairs here before we go." Jian Chen cupped his hands in return. Right now, he hadn't tidied up the positions and tasks for the members, and if he didn't take care of this, then many people would be dissatisfied, which was something Jian Chen wanted to avoid. "That's fine. Since I've said what I needed to say, I will be leaving first then." Commander Duoli looked at Jian Chen for a moment before looking at the men behind him. Then, without any further words, he left the mercenary union. After Commander Duoli left, Jian Chen too left the mercenary union with the group behind him. Since the mercenary union often had many people entering the building at once, it wasn't strange to see 20 or 30 men at the same time. So when Jian Chen left with his group of 40, it hadn't attracted any attention. Kai Er. As they walked, Jian Chen suddenly called out his name. "Here, Captain. What is your command?" The 60-year-old Kai Er hurriedly responded. After seeing Jian Chen's strength, he didn't dare belittle him. After 10 years, when Kai Er was first a small-time mercenary to the man he was now, he had experienced many things, so he knew that if one had the patronage of a strong supporter, they would be stronger than a man without one. Plus, if this supporter was strong enough, then he would become stronger as well, so that no one would dare to offend him. While Jian Chen was around 20 years old, he had somehow managed to make it to such a high level of strength. Based on this fact alone, Kai Er had naturally assumed that Jian Chen had a strong patron supporting him. Even if he had no patron and was simply a genius of cultivation, Kai Er would be willing enough to follow him for that method. Even the other elders and masters of the Weiss clan had come to a similar conclusion. So these 2 elders had readily agreed to follow Jian Chen, because if he continued to walk this path of success, then sooner or later they would stand at the top of the continent as well. This moment was also precisely their chance to reach the top in the future. If they waited until Jian Chen's name stood at the top of the continent, it would be impossible for them to do so by then, even if they wanted to. "Why don't you take everyone to the Kai clan to reside there for a moment while I go to the Lord's mansion? We'll take care of the matters then," Jian Chen said. "Yes, Captain," Kai Er answered respectfully. "Weiss, you return to your clan as well. In the future, you and Kai Er should focus on your merchanting business and work together so that you can control all of Wake City's business. And, don't worry, Captain. Our Kai and Dor clan may have been weaker than the Tianxiong clan even if we join together. But now that the Zhou clan and Tianxiong clan are destroyed, their political power is all but gone. We can seize this chance and fight for the power they left behind and slowly gain control of all of Wake City. However, in this time period, we will need to have a good amount of martial power as well, since many of the powers in Wake City aren't easily bullied. In the case they all join forces, then our Kai and Dor clans will not be enough to be their opponents," Weiss said. Jian Chen nodded his head in approval before saying, "Let's not worry about this too much. Right now Wake City is on the verge of being invaded by magical beasts. When it's over let us talk about it then. After giving some instructions to the Flame Mercenaries members, Jian Chen immediately left for the City Lord's mansion. After Jian Chen had reached the City Lord's mansion, the guards at the gates blocked his path before asking politely, "Are you Sire Jian Chen?" "Correct, that is me." Jian Chen eyed the guard calmly. "Sire Jian Chen, please wait one moment, I'll go notify the Lord." Immediately after confirming Jian Chen's identity, the guard ran into the mansion. Seeing the man disappear into the mansion, Jian Chen wasn't impatient at all. Instead, he began to wait by the doors. Not after long, the expensively dressed Yunli suddenly came walking out from within. "Ah, brother Jian Chen, why are you standing outside the gates?" "Ai, how inconsiderate of my guard, please, come in and sit down." Yunli had a cordial smile on his face as he approached Jian Chen. Smiling in return, Jian Chen followed Yunli into the guest room where they began to talk. Within the peaceful room, Yunli and Jian Chen were about to sit down when Jian Chen asked, "What might the city lord want to talk about with me?" "Ai." Yunli suddenly sighed as the smile disappeared from his face and took on an extremely solemn expression. "Brother Jian Chen, after your appearance, our Wake City has lost quite a large amount of strength. Right now with the impending magical beast invasion, the pressure is quite more than before." Yunli had a bitter look on his face as if he was worried. Jian Chen smiled after listening to Yunli. "Lord, if you would answer this question, was there ever any appearances of any Class 5 magical beasts in the past waves?" Yunli's face grew even more serious as he thought about Jian Chen's question. "Yes, the magical beast waves seem to occur every dozen to 20 years. And according to the past records, from the foundation of Wake City, there has been over 20 waves. Furthermore, there have been 5 recorded incidences with a Class 5 magical beast. With each of these occasions, our Wake City had major losses and paid a heavy price to kill them. With the final occurrence, we had managed to contact a king city where they dispatched an Earth Saint Master to come and deal with it. So that time, there wasn't much damage to our Wake City." "Oh, when you say it like that, the odds of a Class 5 magical beast attacking isn't very high." Jian Chen muttered with a confident smile. "Lord Yunli, you needn't worry. I, Jian Chen, will use my entire strength to protect Wake City from the magical beast wave. As long as there aren't any Class 5 magical beasts, there won't be any problems. Even though we have lost Tianxiong Lai and 3 other great Saint Master experts, this one will be able to fully make up for it without being inferior in any way." With these words from you, brother Jian Chen, then I will definitely be at ease. I believe that Jian Chen isn't one who speaks before he acts. Yunli's tightly knit eyebrows slowly loosened as he listened to Jian Chen. Although he had never seen Jian Chen's strength for himself, he was still painfully aware of how strong he was if he could single-handedly destroy the Zhou clan and Tianxiong clan. "My lord, something major has happened." Suddenly the cries of a panicked person could be heard from outside the room. Shortly afterward, the closed doors to the room had been thrown open as a heavily bloody soldier suddenly came running in. "My lord, something terrible has happened. The small squadron we sent into the magical beast forest on a scouting mission suddenly came across a Class 5 magical beast. Everyone aside from me was killed by the Class 5 magical beast." The soldier shouted with a labored breath as he tried to convey his words coherently. Chapter 231, The Sighting. What? A Class 5 magical beast? The sudden news instantly broke the silence in the meeting room. Immediately, Yunli's face paled as he stood up from his chair. With a single stride he reached the soldier and grabbed onto his clothes with both hands and a look of disbelief. "What did you say? Did you really see a Class 5 magical beast?" Yunli's words were practically shouts by this point. Yes, my lord, we came across a Class 5 magical beast in the magical beast mountain range." The soldier's voice began to tremble as his face drained with color. Even Jian Chen's face had hardened as he heard the words of a Class 5 magical beast being cited. A Class 5 magical beast rivaled an Earth Saint Master in strength, but they had a natural superiority over humans and could easily fight against them. Unless a person had an extremely strong battle skill, they definitely wouldn't be considered an opponent for a Class 5 magical beast. Besides, Wake City wasn't a city where many Earth Saint Masters came to visit, making a Class 5 magical beast almost a paragon without a rival existence to them. A Class 5 magical beast was to an Earth Saint Master what a Class 4 magical beast was to a Great Saint Master. There was a clear divide between the two, almost as wide as the heavens and earth. In comparison, a Great Saint Master's strength compared to an Earth Saint Master was like watching a primary saint who had just condensed his saint weapon fight against a peak Great Saint. It would be a definite failure for the lower-ranking saint and would be impossible for them to win. Although Jian Chen had previously killed 2 Class 5 magical beasts in the Magical Beast Mountain Range, that was when both magical beasts were in a severely injured state where they couldn't even stand up. Their lives were hanging by a thread, but even then, he had paid a hefty price for killing the 2 of them. Jian Chen had no doubts that a Class 5 magical beast in an optimal state was far stronger than the Earth Saint Master who had chased him from Phoenix City. However, the appearance of a Class 5 magical beast only made him feel much greater pressure. That was because he had the Azure and Violet Sword spirits to assist him and increase his strength several times over. He was confident that his power was enough to punish a peak Class 5 magical beast with his sword, as long as he didn't encounter any bizarre existences like the silver-striped golden snake. Oh no, things are getting worse now that a Class 5 magical beast was seen. Yunli spoke with a hardened face. His eyebrows furrowed together in thought before finally muttering, "No, this won't do. Our Wake City is too weak to defend against the attack of a Class 5 magical beast. I must ask a King City immediately, otherwise Wake City will suffer tremendous damages." Up to now, there was no hesitation from Yunli as he immediately strode outside without even looking back at Jian Chen. A Class 5 magical beast was definitely a fatal enemy to Wake City's existence and could not be taken lightly. So, this matter had to be the first thing resolved and have some high-leveled experts come deal with the Class 5 magical beast straight away. Lord Yunli exited the room and went to his study where he grabbed a brush and paper to immediately start writing a message on it. After he was done, he immediately rolled it up into a cylinder and tied it with a piece of string. "Bring the fastest messenger bird, we have to bring this to Monarch City's lord immediately." "Yes, my lord." Immediately a soldier came in and quickly took the letter before leaving the room once more. "This is an order. From this moment on, the appearance of a Class 5 magical beast will be kept a secret from everyone. And in the meanwhile, do not travel out by yourself and bring the leader of the Wake City's Mercenary Union branch here. Finally, keep a close eye out on the activity of the Magical Beast Mountain Range." Yunli commanded to every guard he had before striding away. The news of a Class 5 magical beast appearing had stunned everyone who had initially heard the report, but Yunli had no intentions of announcing this to the public. He was afraid if that happened, then many people would be too intimidated by the beast and decide to leave Wake City in order to save their own necks. If this happened, then Wake City's defensive strength would plummet to the point where the city would eventually be flooded with magical beasts. Right now, Yunli had only one hope. He could only hope that a few experts would come help with this Class 5 magical beast. In this case, then the Class 5 magical beast would be able to be defended against and they could avoid disastrous losses. Jian Chen left the Lord's mansion by himself in thought. Although a Class 5 magical beast gave him plenty of pressure, it didn't affect him too much. In fact, he had secretly waited for one to come. Since his Azure and Violet Sword Chi was able to shred through the defenses of a war beast that was reputed to have the same level of defensive power as an Earth Saint Master as if it was tofu, it could be seen clearly that the Azure and Violet Sword Chi were insanely powerful. If it was that effective on a war beast, then what type of result would it have on a Class 5 magical beast? Following the route he had memorized back to the Kai clan, he quickly entered the courtyard Kai heir had allocated for the flame mercenaries to live in temporarily. The Kai clan was a 30-year-old clan, and so the information it had collected on others couldn't compare to the Zhou clan. Thus, the guards of the clan only numbered around 100. Under the supervision of the armored Kai heir, another group of guards would patrol around the flame mercenaries' courtyard. This was a standard 4-sided courtyard with 3 sides being a residential area and the last side being the front gate. In the middle there was a large patch of grass where a few dozen flame mercenaries sat in small groups and chatted among each other. The moment Jian Chen had arrived, everyone in the vicinity snapped their mouths shut and immediately stood up to greet him with shouts of, "Captain." Staring impassively around himself, he spoke, "Seth, Duokong, Charkas, Mo Tian, and Qingfeng, have the 5 returned yet?" "Captain, those 5 haven't come back yet. I think they're dealing with their own mercenary groups." A 30-year-old mercenary responded. Suddenly, a voice called out behind him as a servant of the Kai clan suddenly came running towards Jian Chen. There was a fearful tint in his eyes as he approached before stopping right in front of Jian Chen. "My lord, the Golden Dragon mercenaries and Charkas mercenaries." Before the servant had even finished speaking, Kai heir waved his hand, "I know already, you may go." "Yes, my lord." Jian Chen smiled at the servant before turning to Kai heir, "Everyone stay here for now. Kai heir, accompany me to see just what surprise the 5 of them have brought me." Chapter 232, Unsatisfied? Then challenge me. Jian Chen and Kai heir walked to the front gates of the courtyard where the both of them could see the 5 captains standing with a large group behind them. Not a single guard by the gates had a happy expression while staring at them. The moment Jian Chen and Kai heir walked out to the gates, every single person standing behind Seth's mercenary group suddenly began to emit a faint aura of bloodlust. This was something only those truly baptized in the waters of death could prepare themselves for. In front of this amassed group of bloodlust, only those with a strong will would be able to approach. "Captain! Captain!" Upon seeing Jian Chen, Seth, Duokong, Charkas, Mo Tian and Qingfeng cried out to him. Straight after the 5 called out Jian Chen's name, the 100 men immediately focused their glares onto Jian Chen with cold stares like ice and their bloodlust matching those of a beast. However, after seeing how young Jian Chen was, a few of them couldn't help but look on in shock. Before they came, their captains hadn't disclosed the matter at all to them. So they knew quite clearly that they were to follow their captains to join an even stronger mercenary group with greater potential. Switching mercenary groups wasn't an unacceptable task to them, and so they tagged along with their captains to see this group. However, they didn't imagine that their new captain would be this young. 5 mercenary groups. The men behind us are our good brothers and the cream of the crop who are willing to join the flame mercenaries. Charkas pointed at the group behind him as he spoke to Jian Chen. There's a total of 121 men with us here. The hot-blooded mercenaries have 32 men, the Gold Dragon mercenaries have 25, the Charkas mercenaries has 17, the mercenaries of Slaughter have 28, and the Zephyr mercenaries have 19 men. Mo Tian spoke loudly. Jian Chen looked at the 100 and a few men with a small smile and nodded. Not bad at all. Let's talk more inside. Afterward, Seth and the other 4 led the group past the gates of the Kai clan, the wide eyes of the guards and into the courtyards. In the middle of the 4-sided courtyard, 170 men stood and stared evenly toward Jian Chen with expectant postures. Staring at the men in front of him with an observant eye, he spoke out loud, "Fellow brothers, I do not care what faction or mercenary group you used to be a part of. Right now, I want to make this clear. You are all now a part of the Flame Mercenaries, a family within a family. We must work hard for the benefit of our Flame Mercenaries, but I believe that with everyone working together, our strength will grow to where we will shock the entire Tianyuan continent and become the #1 mercenary group on the continent. This is Jian Chen's goal. After Jian Chen finished speaking, the crowd went silent for a moment before someone finally broke the silence. Then who is the captain of our flame mercenaries? A person within the crowd asked. Jian Chen smiled as he heard the question before answering, from today onward, I am the captain of the flame mercenaries. And why are you our captain? Another unsatisfied person exclaimed. That's right, just what reason do you have to be our captain? Kid, your hair hasn't even grown long and yet you want to be our captain, that's not an easy role to fill, that's right. His words are right. Slowly, the sounds of opposition grew louder and louder as many people began to voice their complaints. From the group Seth had brought, the vast majority of them were unhappy to hear that Jian Chen would be their captain. Although they all heard that their new captain was incredibly strong, with Jian Chen's age, how could they believe that? Jian Chen was only 20 years old at the most, just how strong could he possibly be? In regards to the noise of the opposition, Seth and the other 4 chose to go silent and watch. If Jian Chen wasn't even able to resolve such a small issue like this, then how would he lead the mercenaries onto the world stage? Jian Chen continued to smile despite the voices of resentment. He had expected this to happen. My strength, of course, is far stronger than yours. In this continent where power reigns supreme, strength is what decides everything. If you do not accept me as your leader, then come up and challenge me. Whoever can dodge my sword will be the captain that I will follow. Jian Chen's sword in its regular speed could make a great Saint Master flustered in 3 moves, and then bring them to a standstill in 5 moves. If he were to go all out, then even a great Saint Master would be killed. Right in front of him were only men at the Saint Master level. There would be no way for them to dodge or even defend against his sword. How arrogant of you. Then allow me to come and test just how much power a wimpy kid like you has. A burly dark-skinned man suddenly leapt from within the crowd and brandished his newly formed saint weapon in the shape of a large axe. Make your move then. Jian Chen exclaimed with a smile at the man. At the same time, the silver light wind sword appeared in his hand. Although the man in front of him was only a peak Saint Master and didn't require using his sword, he had decided that for the sake of displaying his superiority, he would need to use the light wind sword. Seeing the thin sword in Jian Chen's hand, the man didn't feel threatened at all. Taking a deep breath, he began to shout before charging at Jian Chen to chop him down. Against the incoming axe, Jian Chen didn't bother to dodge or defend at all. Suddenly, just in the moment before the axe could make contact with him, a silver flash of light came into view of the man's eye while the axe simultaneously pierced through Jian Chen's chest. Shua! From far away, the group of people gasped in surprise. They didn't think that such an arrogant person like Jian Chen was nothing more than a thin stick in the wind and had lost his life that easily. However, the guards who had joined the flame mercenaries from the Tianxiong clan didn't have a change in their expression at all. They had clearly seen Jian Chen's strength for themselves. There was no way that such a simple attack like this would be able to make a claim on Jian Chen's life. How queer, that was actually a phantom image. Chapter 233, The #1 Power in Wake City. How queer, that was just a phantom image. Following that surprised shout, Jian Chen's figure began to slowly change before disappearing into the air. Following afterward, Jian Chen suddenly appeared out of nowhere 5 meters away. In that one brief moment, only the great Saint Masters had seen Jian Chen move to make a phantom image. Everyone else had been unable to register his movements. The man who had struck at Jian Chen was shocked, but since he had been through hundreds of battles, he forced his emotions back down and tried to slash at Jian Chen once more with even more saint force than before. The sharp blade of the axe made a loud swish sound as it flew through the air down onto Jian Chen. Jian Chen stood emotionlessly as he awaited for the man to reach him. The light wind sword had already long disappeared from his hands, but he looked at the man and spoke gently, "You've already lost." The man looked at Jian Chen blankly. At Jian Chen's words, he couldn't help but to stop for a moment as he asked with a perplexed look, "I've lost? How did I lose?" Smiling at the man's words, Jian Chen continued to look at him with a cheerful expression, "Take a look at your neck." At this, the man touched his neck gingerly with his fingertips only to feel quite clearly a small sliver of a wound on his neck. He didn't know when that wound had appeared, but he did know that it wasn't there before. The wound had only just cut open the topmost layer of his skin so that he couldn't feel any blood leaking out or even any pain. Realizing that even though he didn't feel anything, there was still nonetheless a wound on his neck. Instantly, the man's face paled as a layer of sweat began to appear on his forehead. Did you do that?" he asked astonished. The man didn't know how he wasn't even able to feel the cut when it was made or when it happened. He did know, however, that if the wound was any deeper, then he wouldn't be standing alive on his feet. Laughing, Jian Chen nodded his head. "Do you still wish to continue fighting me?" Just give up, you're no match for the captain. If the captain wanted you to die, then you'd be dead where you stood." Duo Kong spoke out. In his eyes, there was a rarely seen huge amount of admiration. Although he did not use a sword, Duo Kong fully understood that Jian Chen's mastery of the sword had reached a level of perfection. Yes. The man was an ex-member of the Golden Dragon Mercenaries and Duo Kong was his previous captain. The words of Duo Kong would surely be the same as imperial law to him, plus, the wound on his neck was already proof enough that if Jian Chen had wanted him dead, then he would be dead. Jian Chen looked around at the other men. "Is there anyone else who wishes to challenge me? My words still stand. If anyone can beat me, then the captain's role will be given to them, as per my pledge." The entire courtyard descended into a deafening silence as the previously chattering group of men stopped talking. The man that had just challenged Jian Chen was a peak Saint Master, which could be considered one of the more decent-leveled expert rankings within Wake City. If an expert of that level couldn't go against Jian Chen, who had only struck out once, then the vast majority of the group wouldn't be able to do any better. Therefore, the whole group began to approve of Jian Chen. With one final look around at everyone, Jian Chen revealed a victorious smile and said, "Since no one is speaking up, then starting today, you are all members of the Flame Mercenaries, and I will be the captain. Are there any complaints?" Jian Chen exclaimed. "I've no objections. I, Duo Kong, pledge myself to you." Duo Kong of the Golden Dragon Mercenaries declared. "I too have no objections. I, Seth, will obey the captain's orders unconditionally." Seth of the Hot-Blooded Mercenaries followed up. After that, the rest of the mercenaries began to pledge themselves to the Flame Mercenaries. If their old captains had acknowledged him, then naturally they would follow suit and try to appease their new captain. Afterward, Jian Chen brought Seth, Duo Kong, Charkis, Mo Tian, Qing Feng and the rest of the mercenaries to the Mercenary Union. As long as they were to officially join his Flame Mercenaries, they would be able to accomplish missions for the sake of the mercenary group and increase their ranking. If Jian Chen was determined to make the Flame Mercenaries the #1 mercenary group within the continent, then the mercenary rankings were unavoidable. This would have to be the first step to accomplishing Kendall's last wish. A group of 100 men along with 5 of Wake City's reputable members had quickly caused a disturbance in the streets. Each and every bystander looked on at the group with shock, and when they made out the figures of Duo Kong and the other great Saint Masters, they couldn't help but feel excited as they talked among themselves. Duo Kong and the other great Saint Masters were undoubtedly the experts of Wake City. Each one of them was a leader of a 100-man strong mercenary group which could be considered quite powerful within Wake City. Although they were not seen on the streets often, since the 5 of them had shown their faces at the same time, such a thing would naturally cause everyone to look at them. Jian Chen leading at the front was the focal point of the attention as everyone began to wonder who he was. The thing was, no one knew that Duo Kong and the others had already disbanded their mercenary groups. After a long time of handling the official procedures, by the time Jian Chen and the rest walked out of the mercenary union, their statuses had already changed. From the captains of several different mercenary groups, they were now mere C-ranked members. At the same time, the Flame Mercenaries were now 600 members strong. Aside from Jian Chen, there were 7 Great Saint Masters and 6 Saint Masters. Although this number wasn't big, they could already be considered the strongest power in Wake City. At this point, only the city lord of Wake City with his troops of 200,000 soldiers would be able to contend against the Flame Mercenaries. Also, the news that Seth and the other 4 men joined an unknown mercenary group had spread like wildfire from the mercenary union. In a flash, this piece of information had caused the entirety of Wake City to be shocked. As for the never-before heard of Flame Mercenaries, their name had quickly made its way around the entire city. Jian Chen hadn't cared at all when the whole of Wake City went into an uproar over this sudden development, since he had long since anticipated a reaction like this. After the procedures were done, Jian Chen and the group had immediately returned back to the Kai clan's courtyards. In the expansive courtyard, everyone was sitting down as Jian Chen began to explain a few things. Holding a space belt, he held it towards Kai Air and said, "There's a few monster cores inside, distribute a few to everyone and cancel any activities for now. Have everyone carefully increase their strength and make sure they are at their optimal state for the magical beast wave." Kai Air took the space belt from Jian Chen and proceeded to distribute the inside items to everyone. Jian Chen then took out 7 fist-sized class 4 monster cores and proceeded to hand it over to the Great Saint Masters. For the next 2 days you will all also improve your own strength. However much you increase is however much you'll need. This next magical beast wave will have a class 5 magical beast. The Great Saint Masters took the class 4 monster cores, but the moment they heard the news of a class 5 magical beast, Charkis couldn't help but gasp, "What? There's going to be a class 5 magical beast?" Jian Chen nodded his head seriously, "That's right, there will be a class 5 magical beast. It would seem that this magical beast wave won't be as easy to defend this time." Everyone looked at Jian Chen with a serious expression as they digested his words. Some had even gone deathly pale at the very mention of a class 5 magical beast. "Captain, a class 5 magical beast is indeed hard to defend against. I'm afraid that this time Wake City will have a disaster. I can't even say that Wake City will be able to be saved this time. I suggest that we immediately leave the city." A petite-looking man spoke with a tremble in his voice. The threat of a class 5 magical beast had left a fearful effect on his heart. Hearing this, Jian Chen furrowed his eyebrows and spoke, "What are you afraid of? It's not as if the heavens are crashing down upon us. There isn't a need for everyone to worry about this class 5 magical beast. I will find a way to deal with it." Jian Chen's confident words made everyone look at him in astonishment, some even stared at him in disbelief. Jian Chen's words had made everyone think that Jian Chen was going to reveal his strength or that he had a way to deal with the magical beast. Even then, because of his age, some people were still very skeptical of his strength. So because of that, someone couldn't help but wonder, could it be that he began to cultivate from within the womb? The Flame Mercenaries still couldn't help but feel shocked for a moment before becoming extremely excited. An Earth Saint Master was undoubtedly one of the higher-level experts of the Tianyuan continent. For them to have an expert of the Earth Saint Master level within their mercenary group, caused every person to have the same thought: if they were to stay in this mercenary group, then they would definitely be able to achieve success without too much effort. Even the Great Saint Masters had a relieved look on their faces. It was no wonder that Jian Chen was able to fight against 9 Great Saint Masters without any trouble before finally killing 2 of them with ease. This would be no problem for an Earth Saint Master. Jian Chen didn't care for their reactions as he waved his hand, "Go ahead and split for now. Carefully improve your own strength so that your chances of surviving the magical beast wave invasion will be increased." Chapter 234, Battle Skill, an unexpected discovery afterwards, Jian Chen walked to a courtyard that the Kai clan had specifically made for him. Jian Chen sat at a table in this spacious and quiet courtyard and pulled out 3 space belts. One of these 4 space belts was from Zhou Butong of the Zhou clan. 2 others were from Tianxiong Lai and Tianxiong Daoyun. Back when he had left the Tianxiong clan, Jian Chen had gathered the 2 brothers' space belts. The day before, he had destroyed the Zhou clan and then immediately destroyed the even stronger Tianxiong clan, so Jian Chen had spent a night recovering the Saint Force he had lost. This meant that he hadn't had any time to examine the contents within the space belt. He now finally had some time to spare, and so he could look at Zhou Butong's space belt closely. Jian Chen extended his arm to reach for the space belt and immediately looked at the items within. Inside the space belt, there was a small mountain of Class 1 and Class 2 monster cores, both numbering to around 200 in quantity. By the side, there was a small pile of Class 3 monster cores, though smaller than the mountain besides it, there were still 20 cores. Meanwhile, there were only 2 Class 4 monster cores. Apart from that, there were 4 small piles of coins. Copper, silver, gold, and purple coins were all gathered in 4 neat little piles, and in Jian Chen's estimation, there was a total of 10,000 purple coins worth of money. This must have been the daily allowance for the expenditures of the Zhou clan. Aside from this, the space belt had a few other things like clothes, but nothing too precious. After that, the space belts of Tianxiong Lai and Tianxiong Daoyun were examined. Tianxiong Lai's space belt had plenty of monster cores. There were 200 Class 1 and Class 2 monster cores, 40 Class 3 monster cores and 5 Class 4 monster cores. There were 2,000 purple coins and a purple card with an unknown amount of money associated with it. Tianxiong Daoyun's space belt, on the other hand, was more wretched. Aside from 100 purple coins, there were only 12 Class 3 monster cores and a single Class 4 monster core. After examining all 3 space belts, Jian Chen couldn't help but have a wide smile on his face. There was well over 10,000 purple coins in the 3 space belts, 400 Class 1 and Class 2 monster cores, and 60 Class 3 monster cores. This wasn't a small amount of profit, but the most important thing was that there was a purple card with an unknown amount of money inside. After that, Jian Chen took out the space ring he got from Zhou Butong from his space belt. This space ring was silver in color and had a simple decorative design that looked like something a woman might wear. Jian Chen sized up this space ring in his hand for a moment before taking a peek inside. The space ring was a grade higher than a space belt in storage capacity. Its interdimensional storage was vastly incomparable to a space belt, and even the most expensive space belt could only hold a few cubic meters worth of space in storage. Although this space ring was not comparable in quality to the one given to him by his father, it was still 50 cubic meters large. Within the vast storage of the space ring, there was a wide variety of expensive-looking pottery. And in the middle, a single bookshelf with 3 sets of books towered over the other items. By its side, a slightly glowing purple card sat on the ground. Jian Chen looked at the 3 books with a growing interest. He didn't have any hesitation and immediately looked through the books. A record of valuable treasures. 6 words on the cover of the first book caught Jian Chen's eyes, and they brightened from what he saw. Calming down his rapidly fluctuating emotions, Jian Chen grabbed the first book to reveal the second. Human Tier Battle Skill Wind Control. From those words, Jian Chen's eyes dilated as his heart began to thump loudly. A battle skill, this is somehow a battle skill. Jian Chen cried out in shock. He had never expected to find that Zhou Butong had been hiding a battle skill. On the Tian Yuan continent, they were priceless treasures, and compared to the other cultivation treasures, even the lowest-ranked battle skills were still priceless. Jian Chen's eyes went back to the cover on the book as he slowly exhaled. With some disappointment, he couldn't help but mutter to himself, "Still, what a shame that this is only a human tier battle skill." Battle skills were split into 4 levels. The highest was the Saint tier, then the Heaven tier, Earth tier, and finally the lowest Human tier. Within each tier, they were then classified by another 3 layers. Slowly bringing his eyes away from the battle skill book, Jian Chen gazed upon the first book to see the 4-word Spirit of the Wind. This was a Human tier cultivation method best suited for those with the Wind Saint force. Shaking his head with disappointment, Jian Chen looked away from the Wind Control and Spirit of the Wind books. These items were things that many people wouldn't even be able to dream about, but to him, these were something that were of little use. When he was in Kargath Academy, he had access to even Heaven tier cultivation methods, so a Human tier cultivation method wasn't something that could spark his interest. Jian Chen set the treasured objects back on the table and then slowly started to read. Time quickly went by as 2 days came and went. In those 2 days, Jian Chen and the Flame Mercenaries were all sitting within the Kai clan courtyards cultivating in peace. The news of a Class 5 magical beast had brought about a large amount of pressure on them all, so everyone was trying their best to improve their strength in order to help protect themselves during the coming battle. Also in those 2 days, there were a series of strange-looking men caught around the courtyards. With the appearance of the Flame Mercenaries, it had piqued the attention of both big and small factions of Wake City. That was because 5 great Saint Masters in a single mercenary group could be considered to be a massive amount of power with just them alone. These 5 great Saint Masters were also well known in Wake City, which caused every faction in Wake City to pay attention to the Kai clan. Even though the Zhou and Tianxiong clan had been destroyed, with the impending magical beast wave looming overhead, it had affected the entire Wake City. Aside from the major powers, practically nobody else cared about it. During that night, in the guise of the pitch darkness, a gigantic flying magical beast suddenly landed on top of the city lord's mansion. From the back of the magical beast, 2 figures descended. Chapter 235, Senior Envoys. In the pitch-dark night, a large flying magical beast suddenly descended upon the city lord's mansion. Thanks to the bright illuminations by the building, the shape of the flying magical beast could be roughly determined. It looked like an eagle with pitch-black feathers and its wings spanning out to around 20 meters. On its back, 2 figures suddenly dropped down onto ground below with their clothes billowing in the wind. In the courtyard, Yunli stood by with a group of soldiers standing behind him nervously. Yet there was also an expectant look on each one of their faces. As the flying magical beast descended, Yunli continued to wait, but the moment it drew close, Yunli called out to the 2 figures, "This one is honored to greet the envoys." Dong 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 dong. In the early morning of the Kai clan's courtyards, the large knocking sounds of the doors suddenly broke the early silence. Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes as he looked toward the door. "Kai heir, come in." With that, the doors began to creak open as the expensively robed leader of the Kai clan came walking in. Welcoming the ever-so-calm Jian Chen, he greeted, "Captain, Lord Yunli came by just recently and mentioned that he wanted to see you. He's currently waiting in the main halls." Muttering to himself, Jian Chen said, "Just what does he want me now for?" "That I do not know, but judging by his expression, it must be something serious." Kai heir replied. "Well then, let us greet him." Jian Chen threw the 2 Class 3 monster cores in his hand and followed Kai heir out of the room. Following Kai heir, they reached the halls of Kai clan only to see the armored Yunli standing with a middle-aged man next to him. Then, right by the middle-aged man, a young woman with an appearance revealing her to be around 20 years old stood by his side. In the last 2 days, Jian Chen had made sure to pay attention to each important member of the Kai clan. This middle-aged man was Kai heir's son, Kai Lak. He was 40 years old this year, and the 20-year-old woman by his side was Kai heir's granddaughter, Kai Di. Jian Chen recognized the person Kai Lak was talking to was Commander Duo Li, who was smiling at him. "Captain! Captain!" Seeing Jian Chen, Kai Er's daughter Kai Di immediately rose from her chair to call out to Jian Chen. After the flame mercenaries had entered the Kai clan's courtyards, Kai Er had insisted that his son and granddaughter called Jian Chen captain as well. Although both Kai Lak and Kai Di had first objected to it, after some words between them and Kai Er, they had finally relented to the matter. Jian Chen nodded his head at the two as a way of greeting before turning to Commander Duoli. Commander Duoli, what matter might you have for me so early in the morning? Duoli turned to Jian Chen with a small smile. Brother Jian Chen, senior envoys wished to see you. If you could, would you please come with to the Lord's mansion? Senior envoys? Jian Chen's eyes narrowed as he tried to figure out who exactly this senior envoys was. Seeing Jian Chen's confusion, Duoli explained to him, Senior envoys is an expert from Monarch City we hired to help defend Wake City during the wave. From the word expert, Commander Duoli bit his lips as he stared at Jian Chen with a look of reverence. Hearing that, Jian Chen's eyes flashed with hesitation as he spoke. Commander Duoli, do you know for what reason this senior envoys wishes to see me? This I am not sure. Senior envoys didn't explain and I didn't dare ask. Duoli shook his head. Jian Chen's eyes narrowed once more as he tried to think of many different reasons, but in the end, he could only follow Commander Duoli back to the mansion. At the Lord's mansion, Commander Duoli stopped right in front of the garden before turning around to talk to Jian Chen. Brother Jian Chen, senior envoys is awaiting for you within a pavilion further ahead. I still have some matters to attend to, so I cannot accompany you. Nodding his head in understanding, Jian Chen looked ahead to where the garden was. Surrounding the entire place was a multitude of different types of flowers with a sweet fragrance wafting through the air. With one breath of this fragrance, one would feel that their qi would stabilize since the amount of spiritual essence here was saturated. Jian Chen finally stopped to look at the pavilion in the center of the garden where two expensively robed figures sat underneath drinking wine. Yunli stood by their sides and respectfully poured some wine for them every so often with no guards in sight. Jian Chen stared at the two rich-clothed men for a moment. His mind had realized that these two were the ones that Duoli had referred to as senior envoys, so without hesitation, he began to walk toward the pavilion slowly. On the way, his eyes continued to shift around from spot to spot in the garden. The moment Jian Chen had reached the pavilion, Lord Yunli hurriedly spoke out to the two envoys, senior envoys, this brother here is called Jian Chen. The two envoys looked at Jian Chen at the same time as Jian Chen looked at them. He could see that these two were around 40 years old and one had a gentle disposition that would make anyone have a good feeling about them at first glance. The other's expression was the complete opposite of the other man and he had a cold expression on his face. Despite that, the two had the same type of clothing and accessories. Even more astonishing was that the two's faces were identical. So you're Jian Chen. The gentle-looking figured smile as he greeted Jian Chen. Jian Chen cupped his hands together in greeting, correct, I am Jian Chen. Might this one ask what fellow brothers here want? Jian Chen's voice was neither disrespectful or respectful, and his posture was not improper in etiquette. After Jian Chen finished speaking, a large amount of qi filled the air and began to press down onto Jian Chen with a terrifying amount of pressure. Underneath, Jian Chen immediately felt that it was as if he were being weighed down by a heavy stone and found it suddenly hard to breathe. At this sudden development, Jian Chen's face was startled and his originally calm face gained a serious expression. There was a level of coldness as he stared at the gentle-looking man who was still beaming at him. Not to be outdone, Jian Chen began to fill the air with his own qi which immediately made contact with the one pressing against him. Pa! Following a loud bang, the previously quiet garden was suddenly engulfed in a fierce wind as the flower petals began to dance and fly into the air. Senior envoys. Yunli's face had changed as he cried out to them in a panic. The kind-looking envoy waved his hand at Yunli as he continued to smile at Jian Chen without speaking another word. Chapter 236. The soaring sword Qi. Jian Chen's qi had interweaved with the envoy's qi in midair in a way reminiscent of two dangerous beasts tearing away at each other without relenting. In contrast to where Jian Chen and the envoy were, the garden around them was assaulted by a strong gale which only grew in size with each passing moment. The kindly envoy nodded his head with yet another smile before increasing his output even more. In a moment's notice, the perilous situation Jian Chen was in had suddenly intensified. Jian Chen's face immediately hardened as he felt the qi increase in pressure. It was only just recently that Jian Chen was fighting at an even level with the man, but straight away, Jian Chen felt as if the entire area around him had frozen and he was trapped within. Unable to break free of the restrictions, even his clothes had been tightly pressed against him due to the envoy's qi. Jian Chen's throat released a small growl as he quickly increased his own qi. Quickly, it began to reach a peak, but the amount of qi the other man was still controlling Jian Chen and so he was unable to break free. Despite all of his best efforts, the amount of strength being imposed onto Jian Chen was similar to being tasked with climbing an unclimbable mountain. These two envoys were of the Earth Saint Master class while Jian Chen was only at the primary Great Saint Master level, therefore it was impossible for him to try and compete with either of the two. Although Jian Chen wasn't able to move even a fraction underneath the overwhelming qi, he was still unyielding to the man. His inner saint force continued to circulate as it tried to counteract the foreign qi surrounding him. Underneath Jian Chen's legs, the ground began to split away into several cracks. From the center of his feet, a series of spiderweb-like cracks began to develop in every direction. After the stone had broke, Jian Chen was slowly starting to sink into the ground. Seeing how the envoy from Monarch City was treating Jian Chen, Yunli couldn't help but have an anxious look on his face from the side. In his heart, he had already been convinced that Jian Chen was the young son of an influential clan somewhere with a potential that could only be seen once every 100 years. If a youngster like him was able to reach the Great Saint Master level, then it was hard to tell exactly where his real limit was, or what heights he could reach. If this envoy were to offend Jian Chen, then he wasn't sure exactly what problem would later occur. Most importantly, if Jian Chen were to harbor a grudge after this, then a headache of a problem would definitely occur and trouble would happen. Despite the worry on Yunli's face, the two envoys in front of him were not people he could afford to offend. So, after a single attempt at placating the two, he didn't say anything more and in fear of angering them, he stood by the sidelines once more. The envoy was trying to test Jian Chen's strength and so they continued to increase the pressure onto Jian Chen. At this moment, both of Jian Chen's legs were breaking through the dirt, making him sink into the ground. Jian Chen's face was incomparably white as if a heavy stone was still pressing down onto his body. Just breathing was a difficult task for him, but he continued to grit his teeth and persevere and his eyes grew colder by the second as killing intent grew with it. Clearly, the actions of this envoy had invoked Jian Chen's killing intent. The envoy was still smiling at Jian Chen with a gentle look, almost as if he were a kindly old man looking after his domesticated livestock. However, by this point, the ever-increasing amount of qi pressing down on Jian Chen was so much he wasn't able to move even a fingernail. This must be the true extent of an Earth Saint Master's strength. With just his qi, I've been unable to move, how terrifying. I can't even compare to him as a great Saint Master. Jian Chen thought to himself in shock. The difference between an Earth Saint Master and a Great Saint Master was like the difference between heaven to earth. There was just a huge line that separated between them. Just as Jian Chen was barely able to control his breathing, suddenly the azure and violet glows of light within his dantian suddenly emerged from his body in the form of two glows of light around his head. They looked to be the two handles of a sword that were currently stabbing into his head. At the same time, an unbelievably strong amount of sword qi flew outward almost as if it were appearing out of nowhere. In a split second, the entire garden was filled with sword qi and every unit of air was condensed with it. The feeling was quite sharp, unlike the gentle caress of a simple stream of wind. In fact, the feeling was similar to being sliced by multiple swords with a stinging sensation. The moment the sword qi flew out from Jian Chen's body, the flowers all around the garden began to dance wildly as the next moment, a storm of dust covered the entire area. With a second look, not a single stalk of grass or flower was left remaining. Abruptly, the stone pavilion echoed with a rustling sound, as the entire storm of dust covered the sky in every direction. A short moment later, the outside of the pavilion couldn't even be seen anymore thanks to the dust which completely covered everyone's line of sight. What type of power is this? Hurry up and get back. The two envoys no longer had their calm expression on their faces and immediately flew backward to escape from the perimeter of the sword qi. Even Yun Li's reaction wasn't too slow and he immediately leaped backward as well. His entire face was filled with anxiety before shock quickly overtook it. Just as the two envoys retreated, the two azure and violet-colored swords suddenly disappeared from sight back into his body in a single instance. Following their disappearance, the shroud of sword qi receded as well, leaving behind the remnants of the flower garden with scars everywhere. The two envoys and Yun Li stood 100 meters away in shock as they looked at Jian Chen with disbelief. However, in comparison to earlier, Jian Chen was in a sorrier state than before as the ground beneath his feet were filled with cracks. From the three men's faces, a decent amount of tiny wounds with blood barely leaking out could be seen. Though, they weren't fast enough to retreat before some of their hair had been cut into pieces and floated away into the wind. Even their clothes had been ripped and began to stain with blood. Just what type of power is this? How could it be this terrifying? The gentle-looking envoy cried out with shock, and a healthy amount of fear reflected on his face. In that split second, both envoys had used their saint force to protect themselves. However, something absolutely shocking had happened then. This mysterious type of power had seemingly ignored their defenses and went on to injure both of them. Even more shocking, they had felt countless of tiny blade-like objects cut into them all over their bodies. Their thighs, waists, arms, hands, face, forehead, and chest had all been cut in some way and almost became a bloody mess. Chapter 237, Magical Beast Invasion. Seeing the miserable situation the two envoys were in 100 meters away, Jian Chen felt the final dregs of his anger flowing away from him. Although that envoy had placed an unbelievably strong amount of pressure on him, the consequences they had both suffered were much worse. Not only were their bodies damaged, but it had also been an attack on their superiority as an Earth Saint Master. This by itself would have been enough to insult their honor. Jian Chen continued to survey the sight around him only to see the miserable environment that had been reduced to dust thanks to the sword qi he had emitted. Internally, he couldn't help but to gasp in shock. With the azure and violet sword spirits being so strong, the little amount of sword qi they had released from his body could only make him tremble with shock. An endless amount of shock, to be accurate. For only a small amount of sword qi to bring about such a large impact on an Earth Saint Master, that was unbelievable. If the extremely weak azure and violet sword spirits had such an overwhelming amount of power now, then Jian Chen couldn't even begin to imagine just what kind of terrifying amount of power they might have at their strongest point. This is how strong he is. How terrifying. The raggedy Yun Li went pale in the face as he muttered to himself. His forehead glistened with sweat like the other two envoys by his side. With his clothes no longer doing a proper job, every inch of his body could be seen with wounds and blood dripping all over. If it were not for the fact that he were bleeding, then no one would have believed that he had been injured. The people in Jian Chen's eyes had been completely terrified at his power. Looking at the three of them, he couldn't help but take pleasure in their pain. With a faint smile, he spoke out at last, "Lord Yun Li, senior envoys, are you all fine now?" With each word spoken, Jian Chen took another step toward them. "Brother Jian Chen, don't come any closer." Seeing how Jian Chen was slowly advancing, Yunli couldn't help but feel startled as he cried out loud while simultaneously taking a few steps back as well. From the sudden event that had just transpired, Yunli was so terrified that his courage had completely been obliterated. That unbelievable amount of sword chi was far too terrifying, and if his reaction speed had been any slower, then he had no doubts that he too would have been reduced to nothing more than dust. The two envoys also took a few steps back as they looked at Jian Chen with some dread. At that moment, they had realized a few more things than Yunli. Both of them were painfully aware that despite the saint force they had been so proud of, against this threat, they might as well have had nothing to protect themselves with. Seeing how the two Earth Saint Masters had been reduced to such a state due to the azure and violet sword spirits, Jian Chen couldn't help but feel some self-satisfaction. Lord Yunli and senior envoys, please forgive this one. My outburst was uncontrollable for a moment, but it is no longer a problem. Looking around the garden and its obliterated state, the two envoys couldn't help but have an extremely grim expression on their faces. That power just now, just what was it? Jian Chen shook his head with a sigh. Envoys, please forgive this one. There's just some things that this one cannot speak of. However, that outburst of power just now wasn't under my control. If this one has committed any offenses, this one hopes the seniors forgive it. AI, there is no problem at all. If we are in such a situation like this, then it is our fault completely. If I had not tried to test you with my chi, then that power of yours would never have manifested. The gentle-looking envoy immediately responded. After he had come to Wake City, he had heard about Jian Chen's achievements so far. The one called Jian Chen, he couldn't help but wonder just what type of person this one was. They had also wanted to test his strength just to see if he was as amazing as Lord Yunli said he was. However, they had never expected that in a single experiment, they had eaten such a heavy loss and their face had been lost as well. With this, the cold-looking envoy looked at the other one with a meaningful glare. This is your fault for looking for trouble. Hearing that, the first envoy couldn't help but laugh sheepishly. Jian Chen, if we have offended you, we do hope that you do not take it to heart. Hurriedly, Jian Chen replied back, how could that be? Your words should be coming from me. I truly do wish that seniors do not take offense. Senior envoys, brother Jian Chen, because of this recent destruction, why don't we switch places to talk? Yunli spoke up suddenly. Despite having a body full of injuries, they were nothing more than superficial wounds and would be nothing more than a hindrance. Seeing how the two envoys and Jian Chen had made up, Yunli couldn't help but sigh in relief secretly. Afterward, the three followed Yunli to an even more elegant lounge. On their way to the hall, however, many guards gave strange looks at the ragged condition Yunli and the two envoys were in, but no one said a thing. A little while later, the four finally arrived in the quiet halls where they began to talk to each other. Finally, Jian Chen had found out the envoys' names as well as understanding their natures a little bit more. The two envoys were brothers from the same parents, but their characters had been the exact opposite. The kindly one was the older brother named Cat-Ada. Of the two, he was the well-natured one and only had a smile on his face, allowing people to feel at ease with him. The other person was the younger brother, Katafei. Compared to his older brother, he was rather cold and silent, causing people to feel as if he was extremely distant from them. After the talks, Cat-Ada had continuously tried to wrestle Jian Chen's identity from him, but each time it was carelessly answered with a vague response. Even Cat-Ada had realized later that Jian Chen wasn't willing to answer such a question, so he ceased to ask such questions in order to avoid being confused and to avoid incurring Jian Chen's wrath. After the situation in the garden, Cat-Ada didn't dare to underestimate Jian Chen. At this moment, Duoli had came back with a serious expression. After greeting the envoys, he immediately turned to Yunli. My lord, a report just came in. There's a large wave of magical beasts heading out from the forests toward Wake City. Suddenly, everyone there stopped talking as Yunli gave a heavy stare. How many are there? Many, just far too many for us to even count. Duo Li replied gravely. Was there any traces of a Class 5 magical beast? Katata asked. Our reports say the scouts are too afraid of entering the magical beast mountain range. At the most, they'll enter the outskirts, and so they weren't able to find any traces of it. Duo Li held his hands in an apologetic manner. Duo Li, prepare the entire city immediately. Withdraw the scouts and shut the city gates to prevent anyone from leaving. Yunli thundered as he jumped from his seat to run out of the room. Chapter 238, The eve before the invasion. With Yunli immediately announcing the start of the magical beast wave, the entirety of Wake City had spread the news like wildfire. Suddenly, the entire city exploded into action, as every single mercenary group that heard the news immediately trekked toward the city gates with their brethren to prepare. With the news of combat to be close at hand, the atmosphere was unnaturally serious, but at the same time, everyone was rather excited. The moment Jian Chen left the Lord's mansion, he returned back to the Kai clan, where the 7 great Saint Masters and 100 other members of the Flame Mercenaries ran up to greet him. On the road, not a single caravan could be seen anymore, only a large amount of heavily armored mercenary groups heading toward the same destination. Among them, many of the mercenaries walked with an excited look to their faces. This time, the Mercenary Union in Wake City had issued a report that if they were able to provide the left ear of a magical beast, then they would be able to claim the money reward for killing a magical beast of its rank. The more ears they collected, the more rewards they could collect. While the magical beast wave was extremely dangerous, where one could lose their life if not careful, the allure of a monetary reward was tempting to those not afraid of death. However, this sum of money was all paid for by the city lord personally. Though it was not a small amount of money, with Wake City being so close to the magical beast mountain range and monster cores being a good source of money, it could be said that both Wake City and the lord were rich. Otherwise, they would have never been able to afford the type of walls a first-class city would have. When Jian Chen led the 100 men to the city gates 1,000 meters away, they suddenly found it harder to move as a large throng of men crowded the area and made it impossible to move. At this, Jian Chen merely stepped back and spoke out to the 7 great Saint Masters behind him, "Clear the way for us." The 7 great Saint Masters were all famous people within Wake City, with many people knowing who they were. So, many people immediately cleared a path for them, since many of the men felt intimidated by their presence. Exchanging places with Jian Chen, the 7 men's presence spiked in intensity as Duo Kong shouted out, "Fellow brothers, please make way." Under their control, the amount of power exuding from them had caused the road in front of them to suddenly clear out as if a sharp sword had cut through it and forced the group of people to move off to the side. Isn't that the captain of the Golden Dragon Mercenaries? I didn't think he'd be here. That's the captain of the Hot-Blooded Mercenaries as well. I've heard rumors that they dissolved their mercenary groups to join another group called the Flame Mercenaries. Though, I'm not sure if it's true or not. The moment the 7 great Saint Masters showed their faces, they had immediately garnered the attention of everyone who began to talk about them. Hidden behind the large group, Jian Chen followed the 7 great Saint Masters without gaining anyone's attention. Just as the group was 500 meters away from the walls, suddenly a large commotion could be heard up ahead. Then, a heavily armored soldier came walking towards Jian Chen. It was the commander, Duo Li. Brother Jian Chen, the Lord and senior envoys are waiting for you at the walls. Allow me to accompany you." The moment Commander Duo Li saw Jian Chen, his voice grew even more polite than before. Walking ahead of the group, Jian Chen returned the smile, "Then if you would please do me the honor in leading." Afterward, among the astonished stares of everyone else, Jian Chen and Duo Li left together toward the city gates. The walls of Wake City were that of the same standards of the walls in a first-class city. They were 40 meters tall and 20 meters thick. On top of the walls, there were all sorts of soldiers of various strengths. Not only that, but many strong mercenaries were also on top of the wall. There were also 30 magical crystal cannons mounted over the walls with 5 mercenaries manning each one with a trunk full of monster cores. Commander Duo Li brought Jian Chen to Lord Yunli, who was staring out beyond the city walls with a serious expression. By his side, there were a few well-known figures of Wake City and the 2 envoys. Both of them were wearing black-colored robes and did not look like they were ready to talk. Even if someone were to try to talk to them, it looked as if the envoys wouldn't even bother to pretend to notice them. Lord Yunli, what is the situation looking like now? Jian Chen spoke softly to the Lord. Yunli continued to stare out beyond the city without a change in his expression. It's not looking reassuring. This time's magical beast wave has way more magical beasts than before. Brother Jian Chen, take a look. Their numbers are almost immeasurable. Jian Chen grew solemn after hearing that as he looked to where Yunli was pointing, only to see a black storm of magical beasts slowly make their way toward the city. He couldn't even make out a single magical beast's body, let alone count them. With this spectacle, Jian Chen's eyes could only narrow in concentration. For the mentally stupid magical beasts to walk forward in such a manner like this, there must be a Class 5 magical beast commanding them. After all, they possessed an intellect that, while beneath that of a human, it was enough for them to control other magical beasts. This magical beast wave is quite peculiar. Lord Yunli, I remember the last magical beast wave had magical beasts that just recklessly threw themselves at the walls. How is it this time they are walking in such a disciplined manner? A white-haired elder spoke out in confusion. That's right, the last time Wake City was invaded, it was completely different from this one. Another middle-aged man spoke as he looked at the incoming wave with worry. After the 2 had spoken, the men standing by Yunli's side began to debate among themselves. They weren't men of lesser intelligence, each one of them could realize that something was amiss in this wave. Seeing that everyone had felt something was strange about this wave, Yunli knew that it was no use in trying to hide the secret anymore. Without pondering any longer, he spoke out loud, "Everyone, the truth is, this magical beast wave has a Class 5 magical beast hidden within it. For our Wake City, this magical beast wave could be said to be a test of survival of an extremely grim nature." Chapter 239, The Beginning. Prominence of one's reputation. After hearing Yunli's confession, everyone's face immediately grew deathly serious. Yet, no one was making a loud fuss, since each one of them could roughly guess that this was the reason why the magical beast wave was so different this time around. With a magical beast wave happening in Wake City every 20 or so years, there were plenty of people who would come to participate. So for those who had been in Wake City for many years, they had understood the nature of how a magical beast waves worked. This new wave was especially weird. If the normally dumb magical beasts were suddenly walking in the same manner as a disciplined army, this could only be the work of a Class 5 magical beast. How troublesome this is. A Class 5 magical beast is extremely strong, and even an Earth Saint Master would have trouble being victorious if they fight alone. With our Wake City having no experts of our own to help defend against a Class 5 magical beast, it looks like we can only hope to try and employ a strategy of overwhelming them with our numbers. An expensively robed elder spoke gravely as the news of a Class 5 magical beast had registered completely with him. Against a Class 5 magical beast, we would have to use an entire crowd of great Saint Masters in order to have a hope of overwhelming it. Those who are of the Saint Master level wouldn't have a chance of penetrating its defenses, therefore no hope of doing any type of damage to it at all. Spoke another middle-aged man cloaked in a red robe. He was sturdy in stature and radiated a strong killing intent as he looked at the magical beasts. That's right, a Class 5 magical beast is something that only those at the Great Saint Master level could hope to damage. Even then, if there is a Class 5 magical beast that specializes in defense, then Great Saint Masters couldn't even hope to damage it, even if it stood still for us to hit it. I truly hope that this Class 5 magical beast won't be too hard to deal with, otherwise, Wake City will be extremely hard to defend. A short-haired man spoke out to the others. Words are easy to say, but if a Class 5 magical beast truly does show up, all of our great Saint Masters shouldn't be focused on it alone. Aside from the Class 5 magical beast, there are still a multitude of other magical beasts, certainly including many Class 4 magical beasts. If we were to have all of our great Saint Masters fighting the Class 5 magical beast, then how would we deal with the others? What are you afraid of? Our Wake City has at least 100,000 mercenaries and easily double that in city soldiers. Although we cannot go one-to-one with those beasts, our men will be victorious. I don't believe that our combined mass of people will not be able to defend against these magical beasts, nor will they be able to stand against the magical crystal cannons we have on the walls. Hearing the men begin to quarrel, Yunli cleared his throat. Do not panic, everyone. While a Class 5 magical beast brought us a great deal of pressure, but that has been dealt with. Our enemies right now are those of the Class 4 magical beast and lower. Despite this, there are still a mass amount of magical beasts to deal with, so everyone cannot let down their guards. If we cannot match them with our numbers, then we will fight them with our experience. Lord Yunli had shocked everyone with his words. My lord, what are you saying? The Class 5 magical beast has been dealt with? Could it be there are some Earth Saint Masters in Wake City right now? Yunli nodded his head gravely with a faint smile on his face. That's right, so everyone shouldn't pay attention to the Class 5 magical beast and focus your attention on the other lower-leveled ones. My lord, then do you know where these seniors are? We would like to pay our respects to them. Someone immediately called out. Yunli shook his head with an apologetic expression. My apologies, but the envoys had made it clear that their identities would not be exposed. If they become displeased, then it would be quite disastrous for our Wake City. Hearing that, everyone could only secretly sigh in sadness. Earth Saint Masters were incredibly rare in Wake City, and even in the continent, they were considered experts of the higher order. To these people, they truly wished to pay their respects to them in order to make friends with them and hopefully gain their assistance in any matter. After Yunli had spoken, they had given up on their idea of getting close to them. However, the word envoys had alerted them of a few things worth remembering. Jian Chen, who was standing nearby, wasn't overly noticeable. Instead, he spent his time looking over 100 meters away at the two black-robed envoys. He couldn't help but think too when the two were forced into a miserable position, and smiled as a result. Who knew that the two Earth Saint Master envoys hired by Wake City from Monarch City would have ended up in such a sad condition by him? When Jian Chen's eyes hovered over the two envoys, Kat suddenly felt that he was being stared at. Turning to look at him, he had a kind smile on his face as usual. Brother Jian Chen, come here and let's have a talk, shall we? Although being 100 meters apart and a noisy crowd divided the two, his voice could still be heard loud and clear as if amplified by some unknown mean, so that it felt as if the two were talking right next to each other. Katata's voice had suddenly attracted the attention of everyone else in Yunli's company, who immediately turned to look at the two black-robed envoys. However, their own strengths weren't enough to perceive anything out of the ordinary from the envoy's strength, so when they tried to inspect the two for a moment, they finally lost interest and turned away once more. At the request of an Earth Saint Master like Katata, Jian Chen didn't dare to refuse. Bidding goodbye to Yunli, he immediately headed for the envoy's position. Jian Chen. Hm. Seeing Jian Chen walk by, the white-haired elder's eyebrows furrowed together as he sounded out Jian Chen's name before his eyes suddenly took on an astonished glint as he stared at him. Seeing how the elder was standing perplexed now, the cyan-robed elder to his side whispered to him, Elder Hiyu, what's wrong? The white-haired elder continued to stare at Jian Chen's retreating back, whispering so that Jian Chen couldn't hear. He said, I've heard the name Jian Chen before. Isn't that the same name as the person who destroyed the Zhou and Tianxiong clans? The cyan-robed elder started when he heard that. Immediately, his eyes flew over to Jian Chen's back and sucked in a deep breath of air sharply. Elder Hiyu, I had completely forgotten about the matter until you mentioned it. According to the guards who had fled from the Tianqiong clan, the one who eradicated the Tianqiong clan and single-handedly beat 9 great saint masters was a 20-year-old youth who is apparently quite handsome to look at. The youth who just walked by us seems to be a good fit. Take another look. This has to be the very same Jian Chen who destroyed both clans. Chapter 240, 6 Cycles of an Earth Saint Master. The two elders continued to talk gently, but with everyone standing close by having a strong sense of hearing, they had naturally heard the words being spoken. What? The youth that was just standing here, was that Jian Chen? He's so young though, how could he be so strong then? Just how many youths have you seen wield so much power? A man spoke in awe. Right, he truly is so young and yet so unique. After the 2 days where 2 major clans had been annihilated, everyone was painfully aware of the name Jian Chen. However, with the incoming invasion of the magical beasts, everyone had placed the wave in the front of their minds and had forgotten about the clans. This was a point of life or death for them, and so the deaths of the Zhou and Tianqiong clan were not worth a higher priority and quickly receded into obscurity. Jian Chen's name was no longer mentioned either and did not come to mind as quickly. This can't be said for sure. A tall man sneered with some contempt. Those were nothing more than rumors, and none of us had seen the matter for ourselves personally. But to me, I'm sure these rumors are only partial truths and were greatly exaggerated. Just look how young he is, he can't be a year past 20. How can someone so young cultivate to such a powerful level? Maybe he began cultivating when he was in his mother's womb? We can't say for certain that the destruction of the Zhou and Tianqiong clan was done by one person or with the help of a few others. The others began to nod their heads. What this man had said had a great deal of logic behind it. Rumors were rumors after all. Each one of them had weathered many storms and listened to many rumors, but only a small part of them were true, while the vast majority were half-truths or not even truths at all. Hearing the group trying to guess at the real truth, Yunli couldn't help but reveal a knowing smile on his face, yet at the same time, his body couldn't help but shake and tremble for a moment. He could only lament over the fact that he too was not aware of Jian Chen's strength, but he did know that the event regarding him and the envoy in the garden not too long ago had forced both the envoys and him to take a major loss. This wasn't something that Yunli was willing to share with the group. Jian Chen arrived at where the envoys stood with a smile. Whether or not Wake City can be successfully defended depends on senior envoys. Cat Ada could only laugh as he looked at Jian Chen with an amicable smile. It was this smile that made everyone want to be good friends with him. Jian Chen, since I'm older than you, might I call you Junior Jian Chen, or is that too much? Cat Ada asked casually. There's no problem at all, of course. Jian Chen replied with a smile. Even though Cat Ada was smiling at him with such a kind look, he was still on guard. In his experience, if Katada's expression was a genuine feeling from the heart, then he was definitely a person worthy of being a friend with. However, if it was nothing more than something fake, then the man's strength should be feared and guarded against. Cat Ada looked at Jian Chen closely. Junior Jian Chen, although my brother and I are both Earth Saint Masters, the strength of a Class 5 magical beast is still something that can go against our expectations. Even if the two of us were to join hands to kill the magical beast, it would still be a difficult task, so therefore, I sincerely hope that Junior can lend us a hand if the time arises. With a self-deprecating smile, Jian Chen replied, Senior Envoy, you must be joking. I've only the strength of a great Saint Master. How would I fight against a Class 5 magical beast? Doing so would be the same as throwing my life away. Even though he had said that, Jian Chen's heart couldn't help but thirst to fight against a Class 5 magical beast, but at the same time he knew that his strength wasn't sufficient enough to fight against one unless he used the strength of the Azure and Violet Sword Qi. Junior, you truly are modest. In the garden you had displayed such an explosive amount of power that frightened even my brother and me. Even now, my body still aches from the pain I felt then. If Junior is to use that same power, then I am sure that the Class 5 magical beast will fall to your hands. Cat Ada said. Jian Chen had a bitter smile on his face. Senior envoys, that very power isn't something I can control. Nonetheless, this one will strive hard to defend Wake City against the magical beast wave. As long as you mean those words, then my heart will truly be at ease. Cat Ada spoke with some relief. Taking note of the change in his tone, Jian Chen quickly continued, Senior envoys, with you two here, this magical beast wave will be no problem, correct? Hearing that, Cat Ada could only sigh. True, before, I didn't even bother to think the Class 5 magical beast to be my enemy. But now that I am standing here, I don't dare belittle it. Jian Chen's expression changed as well. Could it be that the Class 5 magical beast will be hard to deal with even if both seniors join together? He asked with surprise. Correct. Katata's smile suddenly disappeared without a trace as it grew unnaturally serious. When my brother and I were standing here, we both detected a presence so strong that it could suppress even the both of us. Katata's evenly spoken words had been like a clap of thunder in Jian Chen's ears. He couldn't help but be utterly surprised as he muttered, how is that possible? A Class 5 magical beast with a presence so strong that it could suppress both seniors? Just how strong is that magical beast? Cat Ada smiled bitterly. Junior Jian Chen, it seems to me that you don't know how Earth Saint Masters are classified, allow me to explain it to you. He paused for a moment to draw breath before continuing, Saints, Great Saints, Saint Master, and Great Saint Masters all are split into 3 additional layers. Those 3 layers are the primary, middle and peak layers. After the Earth Saint Master realm, there is suddenly 6 different layers of strength. We call these the 6 cycles. The first cycle is weakest and the 6th cycle is the highest. In the case that one breaks through to the 6th cycle of the Earth Saint Master realm, the following stage is the Heaven Saint Master realm. My brother Katafii and I are only at the 2nd cycle in ranking. As for the hidden Class 5 magical beast, I suspect it is at the 4th cycle in terms of strength at the very least. It's even possible that it is at the 5th cycle, where it is many times stronger than my brother and I combined. Jian Chen's face grew deathly serious as he listened to Cat Ada. When Cat Ada had said that Earth Saint Masters were divided into different levels of strength, he couldn't help but wonder how strong the Class 5 magical beast that was found in the forest was. Chapter 241, Start of the Invasion. Cat Ada continued to speak. An Earth Saint Master are separated evenly between the cycles. A 1st cycle Earth Saint Master is as far away from a 6th cycle as a Saint Master is from a peak Great Saint Master. There is no chance of victory for the Saint Master, and even if my brother and I were to join hands, we both are only at the 2nd cycle level. If we were to join hands, then we would be able to fight against a 3rd cycle Earth Saint Master, but against a 4th cycle Earth Saint Master, then there is no chance. After all this, but our opponent is also a magical beast. Hearing Katata's explanations, Jian Chen couldn't help but be extremely serious. With this, he had finally understood just how wide the differences were between each cycle of an Earth Saint Master. A 1st cycle Earth Saint Master was to a Saint Master as was a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master was to a peak Great Saint Master. At this moment, Jian Chen couldn't help but be anxious as he thought about Wake City's chances of surviving the wave now. Although Wake City wasn't his home and had no feelings of it, Jian Chen had no desire to see the entire population of a city succumb to a magical beast invasion. Wake City's gates had long since closed and the traveling merchant still on the road had been notified of the magical beast wave long ago. So they had all taken a lengthy detour around Wake City's vicinity before taking shelter in a nearby city and waited for the wave to be over before continuing on with their travels. Far away, the dense crowd of magical beasts continued to stamp in a slow trail toward Wake City. Aside from the heavy stomps of their feet, not a single roar could be heard, and from the looks of it, it seemed as if these magical beasts were just soldiers practicing a drill. Ho! Suddenly, the gigantic roar of a magical beast came reverberating from the depths of the magical beast mountain range. Its roar was so loud that even the stones on top of the gate started trembling from the sound. This sudden roar had jolted the tens of thousands of magical beasts whose eyes suddenly grew fearful. Immediately, the magical beasts suddenly stopped where they stood in unison 5 kilometers away from the city walls. Looking at the crowd of magical beasts stop right in front of the city walls almost, Cat Ada let out a breath of air. This hidden Class 5 magical beast is very intelligent. It has fought against humanity multiple times and knows how our magical crystal cannons work. At this distance, the magical beasts are just outside the range of our magical crystal cannons. Cat Ada immediately looked to his still silent brother Katafii. Katafii, our opponent is far stronger than what we thought. By now, it is too late for Monarch City to send any more reinforcements, so it is up to us to defend the city behind us. Katafii nodded his head without a single break in his expression. His eyes still pointed far ahead as if he were trying to find the Class 5 magical beast. Ever since the garden, he had only spoke a single phrase. Throw down the armored wall. Suddenly at Yun Li's command, a large sheet of steel plating suddenly dropped down from the city walls and fully covered the entire city. From far away, it looked as if Wake City had been fully encased by a steel plating. This steel plating was a meter thick and were connected to one another by a steel chain. With each steel plating being so thick, it would be able to repel a Class 3 magical beast with no problem. Seeing how the steel platings were descending down from the walls, Jian Chen couldn't help but sigh in admiration. With a steel plating like the one right in front of him, then the defenses would be extraordinarily strong and could withstand a large amount of force for some time. This truly was another example of how Wake City's defenses could be said to be on par with a first-class city. Commence the firing of the middle-tier magic crystal cannons. Yunli barked out an order. Straight after his command, Cat Ada had an astonished look on his face. I didn't think Wake City would have a middle-tier magical crystal cannon. They truly do deserve to be so near the magical beast mountain range. How rich, a middle-tier magical crystal cannon can fire up to a range of 10 kilometers, that's double the range of a primary-tier magical crystal cannon and can definitely hit those magical beasts. The soldiers began to scamper here and there to follow Yun Li's command. The magical crystal cannons were constructed so that they would take in the energy from the monster cores and would then fire out a special type of energy. On the Tianyuan continent, there were 3 types of magical crystal cannons: primary tier, middle tier, and advanced tier. A primary tier cannon used Class 1 and 2 monster cores as an energy source, but the energy output was not always the same. Middle tier cannons used Class 3 and 4 monster cores, but an advanced tier cannon required a Class 5 monster core at the least to supply the fuel. A primary tier cannon had a range of 3 kilometers while a middle tier cannon had a range of 8 kilometers. On the other hand, an advanced tier cannon could shoot up to a terrifying range of 20 kilometers. This was the best offensive and defensive besiegement weapon. Magical crystal cannons were welcome to every country and city on the Tianyuan continent, with primary tier cannons being practically universal. Each and every major city had a few ready for use while always hoping to come across an advanced tier cannon. Each fortified stronghold by the empire borders had a few advanced tier cannons, but with it requiring Class 5 monster cores, they could fire at once. Thus, they preferred to use it in a disastrous situation or as their last resort, but no attackers would dare try to survive one of those shots head-on. Another reason was that with each shot of the advanced tier cannons, it was the equivalent of shooting away money. After the middle tier cannon was charged up, an extremely tremendous amount of explosive energy began to stir within the cannon, making people feel as if it was about to explode. For those with a small amount of courage, they wouldn't dare to get any closer. In truth, there had been many cases where the cannon wasn't able to handle the extreme amount of energy stirring inside. When that would happen, the energy exploded from within, causing massive damage to everyone around. However, This was a risk that every country was willing to face for the sake of a better chance of winning. A few breaths later, the middle-tier cannon was finally done charging, and with another order from Yunli, the 4 cannons mounted on top of the walls fired immediately. Bang! With an ear-deafening blast, a gigantic blast of energy shot out from the middle-tier cannon at an incredible speed toward the crowd of magical beasts 5 kilometers away. Boom! Following a loud resonating blast, a large cloud of dust filled the air as the explosive energy destroyed anything within a 30-meter radius. Bits and pieces of magical beasts could be seen flying through the air in every direction. The might of a middle-tier cannon was extraordinary and could destroy a Class 3 magical beast with ease. Even a Class 4 magical beast wouldn't be able to take a blast like that easily. If hit directly, they would be instantly fried, and a Class 5 magical beast would at the very least be injured to some degree. The 4 middle-tier magical crystal cannons laid claim to at least 30 Class 3 magical beasts, a good start. As if this was the start of the battle, the magical beasts instantly grew restless and slammed their fists and legs where they stood while snarling angrily. Reload the middle-tier magical crystal cannons and fire straight for the higher-leveled magical beasts. Yunli thundered at the soldiers near the cannons. Yes, at the same time, another heaven-shaking roar came from the magical beast mountain range. This roar was louder than before and spanned for seemingly 20 kilometers, so that even Jian Chen's ears began to ring afterward. Following this roar, it was as if the magical beasts had received an order. With an explosive roar, they all began to charge recklessly toward the city walls. Thousands of magical beasts charged at the walls with reckless abandonment, causing those on the top of the walls to pale for a moment. Even those at the top of the wall could feel a slight tremor growing stronger and stronger. Prepare the crossbows. Yunli barked out another command. Immediately, a series of holes spanning a foot wide opened up within the walls, and upon further assessment, there were about 100 of them. Then one by one, strong-looking men began to prepare the crossbows as intense-looking bolts protruded from the holes. The tips of the bolts looked like they were made with steel, even the shaft resembled that of a superior metal. Each one of these bolts were 2 meters long, and because of that, they required an extremely strong and big crossbow to fire. These weapons were able to pierce through the body of a Class 3 magical beast. Even the ones at the peak level would be tremendously harmed. When the thousands of magical beasts were 3 kilometers away, Yunli gave out an order: fire the primary tier magical crystal cannons, let them feel the pain. Bang! 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 With a slightly less loud explosion, the 10 primary tier cannons fired straight at the magical beasts with an extensively large amount of firepower. The bursts of energy landed firmly against the incoming crowd, completely obliterating large groups. After a short period of time, the primary tier cannons were ready to fire once more, and with another bang, a large amount of energy exploded forth toward the crowd of magical beasts. The blast sent a good few of them flying away, while the remnants of a few magical beasts could be seen spinning through the air. The magical crystal cannons fired a few more rounds before the magical beasts were only 500 meters away. Fire the crossbows! Yunli cried out. Chapter 242, Desperate Close Combat. Fire the crossbows. With Yunli's command, the men stationed within the walls began to fire the crossbows at a lightning-quick speed. The bolts flew through the air with a whistling sound that left the onlookers quite terrified. PCH. 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 With the tremendous penetration force of the bolts, many of the Class 1 magical beasts were instantly speared through. Even as the bolts flew straight through the beasts, they did not slow down in the least. The bolts continued to fly through another 3 or 4 Class 1 magical beasts before finally losing their initial momentum, embedding themselves in one final beast. This volley of firepower had shot over 200 crossbolts, which ended up taking the lives of over 500 Class 1 magical beasts. After that, the second volley of fire immediately mowed down the frontmost magical beasts and filled the air with howls of pain and gunfire. From overhead, the cannons continued to fire down upon the mass of magical beasts that took even more lives. That didn't deter the lesser intelligent magical beasts at all. The scent of all the blood in the air had roused their bloodthirsty nature as they continued to roar out loud while increasing their pace toward the walls despite the continuous volley of fire directed at them. Boom! The magical beasts were now so close to the wall that some of them were now firmly striking at the armored plating on the walls. Following each blow, the steel plating began to tremble and vibrate while some parts of the metal defenses had begun to dent a little. A few of the more fragile magical beasts had begun to make use of their claws in hopes of damaging the steel plating while some had resorted to biting the walls. Some had even managed to take advantage of the various cracks on the plating to climb up it. Seeing the larger magical beasts approach, Yun Li's eyes flashed dangerously as he shouted, "Douse them in hot oil." A vat of scalding hot oil was suddenly poured down from the walls and splashed down onto the magical beasts below. Immediately, the fur of those who got splashed by the oil caught fire before turning the magical beast into a moving bonfire. Underneath, countless of magical beasts howled miserably in pain as their entire bodies were submerged in the burning oil. As their fur caught fire, the fire and the oil began to cause a tremendous amount of damage to their bodies. There was an abundant source of hot oil thanks to the various stoves working to create some more. As the streams of hot oil fell down the walls, the entire ground below had become a sea of fire and misery as the beasts roared in pain. Afterward, a putrid smell wafted up and invaded everyone's noses. Wake City had no moat around, so the magical beasts had no chance to find a source of water to douse themselves in to remove the flames and oil. There were many magical beasts in close proximity, and with their fur being extremely flammable, the fire had quickly spread out to encompass everyone. Underneath the walls, the magical beasts were in chaos. Even though they lacked intelligence, even the dumbest of magical beasts could tell that they were on fire and would die if they stayed there. Consequently, the magical beasts all scattered to get away from the splash radius of the oil. However, the oil continued to rain down from the walls. Despite the steady stream, their supply was not endless and eventually ran out. In the half-hour of warfare, the oil supply had all but ran out, but the damage had been done. The oil had damaged plenty of magical beasts and burnt a good amount of them to death. Now that there was no more threat of the oil, the still-alive magical beasts quickly stamped out the remaining fire and continued to charge at the wall once more. The more nimbler magical beasts began to climb up the walls once more alongside a large number of vipers. Those who ran up the walls were immediately cut down by multiple saint weapons, sending their bisected bodies flying back down to the earth. At the same time, a soldier quickly ran to where Yunli, "A report for the Lord, the crossbows are all finished firing, not a single bolt is left unshot." Looking at the scene below, Yunli nodded slightly before crying out, "Open the gates and attack." Wake City's most terrifying weapon against the magical beast waves were the magical crystal cannons, oil, and crossbows. The cannons were for long-ranged fighting and were used to target and kill the strongest magical beasts. As the magical beasts approached, then they would switch to the oil and crossbows. After a good amount of time passed, both the oil and crossbow ammunition had been all used up. At this moment, the only thing left to do was attack. Slowly, the gates creaked open as the magical beasts changed directions to charge in between the opening gates. However, the moment they stepped inside, the various mercenaries inside blocked them. "Fellow brothers, charge! Work hard to collect those ears. Charge! The sparkling allure of a purple coin will soon lay within our pouches." Every single mercenary was boiling with excitement as their will to make battle soared into the air. One by one they charged through the open gates with their saint weapons leading the vanguard. With each swing a magical beast would fall to the ground, be split in two and rain down blood everywhere. Ho! A few magical beasts cried out in pain as they felt the chilling metal of the saint weapons bite into their bodies. In a flash, many more magical beasts were quickly cut to pieces and a few of the more nimble men quickly grabbed at their ears before happily storing them into their space belts. Hurry up and charge everyone. A huge pile of purple coins await us. Don't waste any time and hurry up, charge. A shout emerged from each mercenary as they charged toward the savage magical beasts almost as if they were pieces of coins. Because of the allure of money, these men were not afraid of death. Underneath the power of every mercenary, every single magical beast was swiftly harvested and stored away for future use. Over 200,000 mercenaries stormed out from Wake City to fight with the magical beasts in intense close combat. Every second a magical beast or mercenary fell to the ground and never get back up. Chapter 243, Several hundred class for magical beasts on the wall. The magical crystal cannons continued to fire at anything within their 3-kilometer range, causing the ground below to have many holes. The soldiers in charge of recharging the cannons hurriedly scrambled about grabbing Class 2 monster cores from chests to load the cannons. Although Wake City was a third-class city, it was extremely close to the magical beast mountain range where monster cores were abundant. So after many years of savings, the amount of monster cores they had stored away were fully capable of empowering 10 different cannons for up to 2 or 3 days of shooting. Jian Chen and the 2 envoys stood on the city walls along with the great Saint Masters and Yunli. Not a single one of them ran to participate since these Class 1 and Class 2 magical beasts could be taken care of by the mercenaries down below. For now, they would wait for the Class 4 magical beasts so they would not squander their energy on the lower-leveled ones. If they did, then who would protect everyone from the Class 4 magical beasts? On top of the wall, Jian Chen looked at the various magical beasts with a look of lament. There truly are many magical beasts gathered here. Cat Ada nodded his head in agreement. Although this is the first time I've come to help Wake City during a magical beast wave, I still think this amount of magical beasts is quite excessive. Take a look at the back, there's a few hundred magical beasts who haven't moved yet. Based on their presence, I can see that they are Class 4 magical beasts. Surveying the back, Jian Chen saw a wide variety of magical beasts of every size and shape waiting. They weren't moving toward Wake City at all and instead kept their distance. Jian Chen wasn't as strong as Cat Ada, so he couldn't tell just how strong they were. Despite the fact that several hundred Class 4 magical beasts sounded quite unbelievable, Jian Chen knew that Cat Ada wouldn't lie about such a thing. These Class 4 magical beasts are equal to great Saint Masters in terms of strength. If our Wake City has a few 100,000 men, then the amount of great Saint Master experts among them pales in comparison. There definitely isn't enough to fight against these Class 4 magical beasts. Right now we can only rely on the magical crystal cannons. With Wake City's 4 middle-tier magical crystal cannons, we should be able to do some damage to the Class 4 magical beasts. They're about 8 kilometers away anyway, that's within the range of those cannons. Cat Ada spoke seriously before waving his hand to Yunli. Yunli, have the 4 middle-tier magical crystal cannons aim at the back over there. Those are all Class 4 magical beasts, the cannons should be enough to kill them and the pressure on us will be lessened. Yes, Senior Envoy. Katata's words were like the commands from a superior officer to his subordinate, so Yunli couldn't disobey. Without hesitation, Yunli immediately ordered the 4 middle-tier cannons to aim at the Class 4 magical beasts and fire. Bang! The cannons fired and the energy within seemed as if it were a shooting star that flew through the air toward the middle of the magical beasts. The fortunate thing was that the group of Class 4 magical beasts were well within the range of the blast zone, and so the energy blasted the ground in the middle of the group, sending dirt flying everywhere as the wild energy wreaked havoc on everything. Immediately, many magical beasts were sent flying 20 meters away from the impact zone along with some body parts. Blood spilled like rain down below. Soon enough, the body parts fell back down into the dust storm, making visibility 0. Ho! The Class 4 magical beasts all cried out in anger, and the injured ones all glared at Wake City dangerously. Their eyes were filled with hatred as they suddenly charged at the walls without the previous patience. Aim at that cluster of magical beasts once more with the middle-tier cannons, keep firing. Yunli called out with a hardened expression. From Katata's words, Yunli had guessed that large amount of magical beasts were of the Class 4 level. Compared to the large amount of the magical beast numbers, the amount of great Saint Masters within the ranks of Wake City soldiers and mercenaries was still far from the triple digits. At most, there were only a few dozen great Saint Masters that could stand their own against a Class 4 magical beasts, so for now the best way to deal with those magical beasts was to use the cannons to whittle away at their numbers. Thanks to the change of targets by the cannons, the previously safe and sound Class 4 magical beasts in the back had suffered a tremendous loss. The middle-tier cannons had brought about a disastrous amount of damage to their ranks, and with each new volley of cannon fire, even more lives were taken. A large amount of the magical beasts began to retreat as the cannons began to focus their fire on them. The remaining few began to snarl and roar as they charged at the walls. Because of the cannons, they had lost all rationality, and in their bloodthirst, they threw the other magical beasts out of the way and even killed a few of the weaker ones in their rampage. At that moment, each one of the magical beasts had broken free from the fearful control of the Class 5 magical beast. The middle-tier cannons continued to fire and fill the skies with sounds from each blast. Time and time again, crowds of Class 4 magical beasts went up in smoke, leaving a crater in the ground below. The Class 4 magical beasts were incredibly fast, however. As the middle-tier magical crystal cannons fired the fifth volley, they had already arrived within 500 meters of the wall. Because of the cannons, their numbers had went from several hundred to around 150 of them, and a great deal of them were injured to some degree as well. Despite the good news, however, the great Saint Masters still had extremely serious expressions on their faces. By then, before Yunli could say anything, the great Saint Masters immediately leaped off the walls down into the crowd of magical beasts. Only they could defend against the Class 4 magical beasts, and if those magical beasts were to fight against the saints or great saints, then there would be catastrophic damages to the human side. In a flash, the dozen great Saint Masters were all engaged in deep combat. At that moment, only Yunli, Jian Chen, and the two envoys were left on the walls without any other great Saint Master there. Even the 7 great Saint Masters from the Flame Mercenaries were beginning to fight the Class 4 magical beasts. Chapter 244, Jian Chen's Action. A fast sword. The area around Wake City had already become a bloody battleground, with 200,000 mercenaries and armored soldiers fighting by the city gates. They had already speared their way through a few kilometers and were soaked with the blood of a few magical beasts. In the back, many of the support soldiers streamed about the battleground with stretchers so that the fallen could be brought back to the city to recover. The entire battleground was dyed red with blood as the greasy smell of battle wafted through the air and into the noses of everyone fighting. Although the battle had only gone on for a small amount of time, the ground was littered with the corpses of magical beasts and humans alike. Every second a person would get injured, while the next second another person would die. 100 Class 4 magical beasts and a few dozen great Saint Masters were fighting against each other, but the situation wasn't looking too well for the humans. A Class 4 magical beast required 2 great Saint Masters to fight against, but at the moment, each magical beast was fighting against 1 great Saint Master. For a short while, the great Saint Masters would be fine, but if time dragged on for too long, then the situation would be hard to tell. Since magical beasts had a natural superiority, humanity could only rely on their saint weapons to fight against the magical beasts, but when that ran out, then their lives would be in extreme danger. The 10 magical crystal cannons on top of the city walls never stopped firing, so the air was filled with the tremors and ear-deafening blasts of explosions that claimed the lives of multiple magical beasts whenever they slammed against a group of them. As the war went on for a longer period of time, the amount of injured people increased as well. The stretchers of men continued to weave in through the city gates with the injured men laying on them crying out in pain. Many of them were missing an arm or a leg, and so the amount of people fighting against the magical beasts began to lessen. Thus, the pressure began to increase on everyone. If this were to go on for any longer, then the surrender of Wake City would only be a matter of time. On top of the walls, Lord Yunli looked at Jian Chen and the two envoys with a troubled look. This magical beast wave has more magical beasts than before and even more Class 4 magical beasts than anticipated. Their numbers far outweigh our great Saint Masters, and if this goes on for any longer, then even if the Class 5 magical beast doesn't attack, the Class 4 magical beasts will trample Wake City. I've looked at the records of the past magical beast waves and I'm afraid that this wave is definitely the most serious one. The amount of Class 4 magical beasts has never gone over 50, but there are well over several hundred of them. God damn it, could all of the Class 4 magical beasts from the Magical Beast Mountain range have come running over? Yunli wiped at his eyebrows to clear away the sweat. The two envoys didn't say a word, so Yunli continued to speak. Senior envoys, do you have any solutions on how to deal with this situation? Katata shook his head with an equally serious expression. I've none. Right now we shouldn't make a move yet. That hidden Class 5 magical beast is extremely strong, so my brother and I must remain here and save up our strength until the moment of its appearance to ensure the best chance. If we waste our energy now, then when that Class 5 magical beast attacks, we won't have a chance of defeating it. Yunli's face grew whiter and whiter as he listened to Katata's words. His entire body began to shake as he observed the battleground below them. His eyes couldn't help but widen and tear up a bit as he muttered, could it be? Could this day be the last day for my Wake City? The two Earth Saint Master envoys were the greatest stabilizers to Yunli's heart, but with Katata's words revealing that it would be difficult to deal with the hidden Class 5 magical beast even if he and his brother joined hands, those words were like a clap of thunder to Yunli's eardrums. By now, he was feeling a great deal of despair. Seeing the look on Yunli's face, Jian Chen let out a breath of air. Then I'll go down to help. The threat of the Class 4 magical beasts is far too big for us to ignore anyways. With that, Jian Chen leaped down the 50-meter-tall city wall. In midair, Jian Chen's body began to speed up somehow like a speeding bullet toward the Class 4 magical beasts. The new member of the Flame Mercenaries, Duo Kong, was currently fighting against a Class 4 magical beast. This Class 4 magical beast was a 3-meter-long black cheetah with extremely fast movements. Both of its paws swished through the air as the extremely sharp talons flew at Duo Kong. Along with the claws, the cheetah roared loudly with a jaw full of blood from the various times Duo Kong was hurt. The black cheetah's eyes were crimson with bloodlust as they glared at Duo Kong almost as if he were its prey. Growling with an angry snarl, its entire body suddenly disappeared in a blur as it shot toward Duo Kong. In that instant its sharp talons glistened in the sunlight as it flew at Duo Kang's chest. Duo Kang's eyes flashed dangerously with no fear at all as the Saint Force enhanced weapon in his hands slashed at the cheetah. The sword and talons met against each other with a large ear-screeching sound as the blast of the impact forced Duo Kong to fly back a few steps. Duo Kang's Saint weapon wasn't enough to cause any sort of damage to the cheetah. The cheetah was momentarily sent back before instantly bounding forward to slash at Duo Kang's back from behind. Duo Kong had not yet fully stabilized his footing after the cheetah had sent him flying backward, so it was hard for him to attack the beast with the same strength as before. Helplessly, he could only bring his sword across his body to protect himself against the claws. The cheetah's claws swiped at Duo Kang's Saint weapon, causing the sword to be knocked back a bit. With the sword firmly out of place, the cheetah suddenly opened its jaws in an effort to bite Duo Kong. With his Saint weapon out of the way, Duo Kang's actions were severely limited. Seeing the wide-open jaws of the cheetah, Duo Kang's face suddenly changed and he abruptly swung his head out of the way. With its jaws wide open, the cheetah emitted an ear-deafening roar as it tried to clamp down its jaws onto Duo Kang's chest. Duo Kang's face was extremely serious. This cheetah had been exceedingly clever when it had attacked him with its claws, leaving him unable to retaliate at all. It would seem that today would be a hard day to escape calamity, since this magical beast was even stronger than he was, and Duo Kang wasn't able to fight against the cheetah with his saint weapon. This time as Duo Kang dodged the fangs, he could feel some color come back to his face. If he were just 1 second slower dodging the fangs, then his chest would have become a bloody mess. What a troublesome matter this is. Duo Kang had a look of despair. Right now he was almost at the whim of the cheetah. With the cheetah attacking at any time, it was getting harder and harder to dodge. This time, a small child-like sized tail suddenly wrapped around Duo Kang's neck, making all movement impossible for him now. Once more, Duo Kang's face turned deathly pale as his eyes gleamed with despair. With his neck captured by the tail, he could no longer dodge the next strike from the black cheetah. Even his saint weapon, the most important item to his life, wouldn't help him here. He would sooner die than relinquish his saint weapon. The iron scent of blood stung Duo Kang's nose as the cheetah's bloody jaw captured Duo Kang's eyes once more. Just before Duo Kang was ready to accept his death, a silver light suddenly flashed in the corner of his eyes. Startled, Duo Kang could only see a silver lightning-like trail of light fly straight through the cheetah's throat. The bloody jaws of the cheetah immediately came to a close just an inch away from Duo Kang's chest. The putrid scent of its jaws was so nauseating to Duo Kang's nose that he didn't dare breathe. Duo Kang was instantly dazed, but the moment he saw the long blade insert itself deep within the cheetah's throat, a look of pure joy appeared within his eyes. This blade was one he was extremely familiar with because he knew just who the owner was. Duo Kang couldn't help but feel extremely grateful after his narrow escape from death. Turning his head to look at the 20-year-old youth to the side, he called out emotionally, "Captain." On this road between life or death, Duo Kang finally realized just how beautiful living was. Although Duo Kang had been in many life or death situations, he had never been in such a perilous situation as this one. If Jian Chen was a second too slow, then his life would have been forfeit and his body a corpse. Jian Chen slowly took the light wind sword out from the cheetah's neck and spoke out to Duo Kang, "Go help out the others, make sure our flame mercenaries lose as few men as possible." "Yes, Captain." Duo Kang immediately responded. Grabbing at the tail still enwrapped around his neck, he uncoiled it and cut away the ear of the cheetah. Then storing it into his space belt, Duo Kang immediately ran off to help out the other brothers of the flame mercenaries. Jian Chen didn't hesitate at all as he immediately ran off to the next closest class for magical beast. This next one was a viper with 6 saint masters fighting against it. 2 of them were injured, leaving the remaining 4 to weave in and out in attempts to protect themselves. Each strike was getting harder to dodge and they were already in a miserable condition. The viper's poison that was spat out at them was enough to make all of the saint masters there afraid of coming into contact with it. So the 6 saint masters could only try to run away from the viper. Suddenly, a silver arc of light streaked by them and immediately pierced into the vitals of the viper before it could even respond. The viper immediately let out a miserable hiss as it collapsed down to the ground. Jian Chen's sword was incomparably fast, so even a class 4 magical beast like the viper wasn't able to perceive the attack at all. "Captain." The 6 saint masters who were fighting the viper called out to Jian Chen straight away. Their eyes had a look of extreme joy in them as they immediately recognized that their captain had rescued them. "If you're injured, head on back to get yourself treated. The rest should go help our fellow brothers. Remember, help our own first and foremost." Dropping an order, Jian Chen immediately ran off to the next beast. With the introduction of Jian Chen to the battlefield, the pressure was significantly less now. In the span of a few breaths, Jian Chen had killed a good amount of the Class 4 magical beasts. Each and every strike of his was unbelievably fast as he weaved in and out of the battlefield. Practically no Class 4 magical beast could dodge Jian Chen's sword, and so with each stab from his sword, another magical beast had its throat stabbed, dying before realizing what was happening. Following the series of Class 4 magical beasts dying in one strike, more and more people on the battlefield were quickly regaining the higher ground. Immediately, each group would run off to help another group fight off a Class 4 magical beast, causing the pressure on everyone to lessen dramatically. Jian Chen traveled forward and backward by himself toward the next closest Class 4 magical beast with his light wind sword continuously flashing with light from each stroke. Whenever a Class 2 or Class 3 magical beast got too close, they would be slaughtered ruthlessly. In Jian Chen's path of destruction, he had left behind a bloody trail. In the time it took to burn a single incense stick, 40 Class 4 magical beasts had died by Jian Chen's hand and countless more Class 2 and Class 3 magical beasts. In the beginning, Jian Chen's strength at the peak Saint Master level was enough to kill a Class 4 magical beast. Now that he was at the Great Saint Master despite being only at the primary level, his strength had been multiplied. Killing a Class 4 magical beast was now much easier than before and didn't require as much energy. That was because Jian Chen's best point was his speed. He was so fast that the magical beasts weren't fast enough to react, and in Jian Chen's eyes, these magical beasts might as well be standing still and would definitely be too slow to dodge. In the world of martial arts, only speed would not betray you. Jian Chen's sword relied heavily on this word, speed. The moment your speed surpassed your opponent's reaction time, then that opponent would be nothing more than a moving target awaiting for you to strike. Ho! Suddenly, an extremely loud roar could be heard from a snowy white bear around 2 meters tall and 4 meters wide emerged out of nowhere and slapped a Great Saint Master with its paw. Bang! Despite the Great Saint Master using his saint weapon to protect himself, the amount of force behind its giant paw was enough to send him flying through the air, blood spurting out from his mouth. At that moment, another nearby Great Saint Master instantly charged at the figure and slashed at its belly with his saint weapon. A thunder-like sound could be heard as the saint weapon stopped right on top of its fur without leaving a single scratch. Not only that, but the recoil the Great Saint Master felt from his blow was enough to send him staggering back 3 steps. The giant bear let out another roar as it moved to slap the Great Saint Master with its paw. All of a sudden, a silver light flew in between the bear and the Great Saint Master. Before the giant bear could even react, the silver light had immediately stabbed straight through its throat. However, the fur defenses of the giant beast was extraordinarily strong, as only the sharp tip of the sword could be stabbed into its throat. Sensing how the light wind sword had been stopped, Jian Chen's eyes flashed with surprise. What a strong defense! Without any further hesitation, a large amount of sword chi exploded from the tip of the sword and enlarged the wound. Immediately the giant bear let out a painful shriek as it then moved away from the Great Saint Master to slap at Jian Chen. Jian Chen pulled out his sword and increased the amount of sword chi radiating from it before stabbing at the bear's throat once more before it could attack him. The incredibly strong defenses that were there before suddenly disappeared into nothing as the light wind sword pushed through the fur, embedding itself deep within the bear's throat. However, the giant bear's paw didn't stop due to inertia and continued its path toward Jian Chen. Jian Chen's right arm clenched onto his sword as he twisted his sword in its throat before pulling it out. With an explosive leap, he flew backward to dodge the paw. Jian Chen didn't care anymore about the bear after that and immediately ran off to the next Class 4 magical beast. He had confidence in his last strike to land a fatal wound on the bear. His light wind sword had completely obliterated the major parts of the bear's throat with its sword chi. With a crucial blow like that, there was no way that the bear would be able to live. Not too long after Jian Chen had left, the giant bear's body finally fell to the ground with a large stream of blood flowing from its neck, forming a pool of blood. The second great Saint Master looked at the bear's body with a pale face. Looking at its corpse, he turned to look at the other man who had been fighting it. Laz, did you kill this earthen bear? Jian Chen's death blow had been far too fast for the man to register, and when he had nearly been hit by the bear's paw, he hadn't seen Jian Chen make his move. The other great Saint Master looked at the body with an extremely shocked expression. How amazing, to kill an earthen bear in 2 strokes, could that man be an Earth Saint Master? Laz, you didn't tell me, how did you manage to kill the earthen bear? When did you get so strong? The great Saint Master repeated with curiosity. Hearing that, the one named Laz shook his head. This earthen bear was not killed by men but by a white-robed figure. With that, Laz's voice suddenly grew emotional as he clasped onto the other man's shoulders. Lai Dao, you didn't see it, that man's strength is truly profound. He had only needed to stab twice with a speed far beyond anything I've seen in order to kill this earthen bear with ease and no retaliation. It took 2 sword strikes to kill the Class 4 earthen bear? Lai Dao cried out with shock. Laz, who is this person? Could he be an Earth Saint Master? That's what I believe as well. He was wearing white, but I don't know who he is. Laz muttered. Lai Dao looked around them only to find the white-robed Jian Chen, who had just stabbed another Class 4 magical beast in the throat with his sword not too far away. Could it be that person? On the wall. This Jian Chen is quite strong. His fighting ability is somehow extremely strong to the point where even a Class 4 magical beast is nothing to him. It only requires 1 strike for him to kill one. Cat Ada looked at the group of magical beasts being killed by Jian Chen before exclaiming his thoughts out loud. What a fast sword! The soft-spoken Katafei said. Cat Ada nodded his head. That's right, his sword is incredibly fast with no wasted movements. Each stroke lands firmly and at the weakest point of the magical beast's neck. Countless Class 4 magical beasts were killed by Jian Chen's sword, and even I can only capture the hazy figure of his sword on the rare occasion. With a speed like that, it is no wonder a Class 4 magical beast can't dodge it. However, what I don't understand is, just how did Jian Chen obtain such a fast sword play like this? Could it be the work of a battle skill? No, I can tell that this is no battle skill. Katafei spoke. It would seem that this Jian Chen's identity is quite mysterious. He has to be the young lord of a well-known clan, otherwise, how could his skill be so outstanding? A young man like him already has such a powerful strength and such a fast sword. Chapter 245, Despair. 3 Class 5 magical beasts. 2 hours later, 100 Class 4 magical beasts had been killed, and practically 99 of them were all killed by Jian Chen. With the Class 4 magical beasts dead, the great Saint Masters were now gaining the upper ground and were completely dominating the weaker-leveled magical beasts. Jian Chen didn't stop even for a moment. The Class 3 magical beasts were his new goal. Separating himself from the others, he immediately set about killing every Class 3 magical beast in sight. Soon enough, the surrounding environment around Jian Chen was filled with a small mountain of magical beasts that had been completely slaughtered by him. Within another crowd of magical beasts, Jian Chen constantly brandished and thrust his sword at an unbelievable speed while maintaining a style of movement that seemed as if he were dancing. Around him on the ground, magical beasts were falling one by one without realizing that they were dead. Their strength was only that of a Class 3 magical beast and were not able to even go up against Jian Chen's might. Almost as if he had eyes on the back of his head, Jian Chen could always quickly dodge out of the way from a sneak attack from behind. Even if he were surrounded, he was not afraid at all and instead began to reap the lives of the magical beasts like a god of death. Against Jian Chen, who seemed to be the embodiment of the god of death, these magical beasts were not afraid at all. Their bloodthirst was instead increasing their berserk nature, yet they did not run at Jian Chen just yet. Instead, each one began to roar out loud with a roar that seemed to reverberate across the horizon. Ho! Just then, another heaven-shaking roar emerged from the forest and shook even the ground everyone was standing on. The moment the magical beasts fighting near Wake City heard the angry roar, a look of fear entered their eyes, and they began to shake as if they were cold. Even the magical beasts that had saint weapons slashed into their bodies just stood there without retaliation, almost as if their terror had prevented them from making a move. Slowing down his slaughter of the magical beasts, Jian Chun pointed his sword at the ground at such an angle that all of the blood on it dripped off. He didn't understand just why the magical beasts were shivering with fear, but when he followed their gaze toward the magical beast mountain range, he suddenly understood. That was where the Class 5 magical beast was. Perhaps, if the magical beast was as strong as Cat Ada said it was, then even if the two strong envoys joined together, at the very most they would only be able to stall it. The forests began to shake for a moment before a 5-meter-tall magical beast walked out from it. This magical beast resembled an orangutan, but not quite. It had no fur on its body, instead, its entire body was covered with dark jade-colored scales like a viper. In the daylight, the scales radiated a brilliant glow. Ho! The ape-like magical beast walked on over from the forest slowly while snarling angrily. Its roar shook the heavens and deafened the ears of everyone around so that their eardrums were trembling from the vibrations. As for the magical beasts that had been fighting the mercenaries, each one of them suddenly turned around and crawled back toward the ape, ignoring the mercenaries. This is the green-scaled ape. Its strength is rumored to be unmatched and its green scales are unbelievably durable. Even an Earth Saint Master isn't able to break them with ease. Seeing the ape, Jian Chun couldn't help but cry out to himself as he felt the domineering pressure it was exhibiting. Cat Ada stood on top of the city wall with a hardened expression as he spoke. I didn't think that the Class 5 magical beast would be a green-scaled ape. Their defenses are abnormally strong and even a 4th cycle Earth Saint Master would be hard-pressed to deal with one. How troublesome. Katafei called out right next to his brother. Ever since the beginning of the war, this was the first time Katafei's face had a significantly different expression. Suddenly, another two figures came out from the forest and stood behind the green-scaled ape. These two figures belonged to a giant-sized magical beast. One was a tiger with a golden mane of fur that was 2 meters high and 5 meters tall. Next to the tiger was another magical beast that was a few dozen meters in length, however it was only as tall as half an adult human. This magical beast resembled that of a crocodile with black leather-like skin and eyes that seemed to reflect coldly with a deadly intent. Several 2-meter-long sword-like spikes were growing on its back, and as it walked into the light, its figure only seemed even more deadly. Upon seeing the two magical beasts, Katata's face grew deathly pale in fright as he cried out, "Golden Fur Tiger King and a Bladed Crocodile. This means there are 3 Class 5 magical beasts." Katafei's face also grew white as he looked at the 3 magical beasts in front of him. He felt an extreme amount of dread now. He and his brother couldn't even fight against the green-scaled ape together, but with the introduction of the Golden Fur Tiger King and the Bladed Crocodile, it would be extremely difficult to fight against 3 Class 5 magical beasts at the same time. Cat Ada sucked in a deep breath as he tried to shake away the extremely cold feeling in his limbs. Immediately, he turned to Yunli. "Quickly, notify every commoner in Wake City, they must evacuate as soon as possible. Wake City is no longer safe." "Yes, I will do that now," Yunli replied with an equally white face. 3 Class 5 magical beasts were not something Wake City could defend against. Even if a middle-tier magical crystal cannon was enough to injure them, Wake City would still need at least 5 Earth Saint Masters to improve their chances somewhat. "What do we do now?" Katafei asked. "Right now we can only hope to stall for time by blocking them. Fight so that the commoners of Wake City will be able to evacuate. Although we are powerless to win, we can still stall for time. If we can do that, then those 3 Class 5 magical beasts will be hindered for just enough time. But we still need to be careful so we don't get injured, otherwise, I'm afraid we will become easy targets for the Class 5 magical beasts and most likely end up dead. Katata spoke seriously. Katafei nodded his head without saying a word. Within the crowd, Jian Chen realized that there were two more magical beasts standing behind the ape. The moment his eyes landed on the golden mane of the golden fur tiger king, a bolt of electricity ran through him as if he remembered a flash from the past. It was in the past that this golden fur tiger king had forced the flame mercenaries to flee. It was in the past that this golden fur tiger king had made the flame mercenaries have only one member left. It was in the past that this golden fur tiger king had killed Uncle Kendall and the rest of his brothers. The selfless Kendall, the outspoken Hupa, and the ever-so-passionate Xiao Dao. The members of the flame mercenaries burned vividly within Jian Chen's mind like a wall scroll. The group had been a happy family for a short moment, but then, everything had changed when the golden fur tiger king attacked. Even though the flame mercenaries still exist, everything was different now. This past memory had been forever burned into Jian Chen's mind so that he would never forget it. The brothers that had passed away long ago, would never return. Their familiar spirits had long since disappeared into the boundless heavens and had left behind only a sorrowful memory. A fierce killing intent flowed out from Jian Chen's eyes as his light wind sword exploded with sword chi. A fierce light shined from the tip of the sword, and if one looked closely enough, there was a hint of azure and violet shining in it. Chapter 246, Class 5 Magical Beast, One Sword to Strike the Head. Jian Chen felt no fear in his heart against these three Class 5 magical beasts, instead he felt only hatred. The three magical beasts stood still with their presence overwhelming the senses of everyone else around while causing the other magical beasts to shiver with fright. Even the mercenaries who had just been fighting them felt a cold feeling of dread within their hearts and a stone-like pressure pressing down on them. What is that? At last, someone spoke referring to the three magical beasts. It's too late, I can't see a good ending from here, a green-scaled ape. How could it be, not good, that's a Class 5 magical beast. Only a Class 5 magical beast would be able to emit such a pressure like this, so those three are Class 5 magical beasts? Heavens, how could there be three of them? Retreat. No one can withstand a Class 5 magical beast. Not too many mercenaries had seen a Class 5 magical beast before, but the ones that did instantly grew fearful and cried out at the sight of them. With three Class 5 magical beasts standing right in front of them, they all grew white with fright. Throwing down their helmets, they began to flee back toward Wake City. Even the great Saint Masters who had known about the Class 5 magical beast already had their faces pale with fright. Although they had foreknowledge of there being an Earth Saint Master expert helping them, the situation was different now. There was three Class 5 magical beasts, even the experts from Monarch City would not be enough to deal with them. Retreat! Everyone retreat! Immediately the mercenaries all cried out the signal to retreat. Straight after, the city gates to Wake City had nearly 200,000 mercenaries and soldiers trying to make their way inside in order to escape from the battlefield. Don't panic everyone, the Class 5 magical beast will be dealt with by us. All of a sudden, a booming voice called out from nowhere as two red streaks of light flew down from the walls like a shooting star toward the Class 5 magical beasts. Both the Earth Saint Masters Katata and Katafei had finally made a move. Although they had wanted to wait a little longer to engage to buy some time, but with the panic happening below, they couldn't hesitate any longer. If the entire fighting force were to retreat into the city, then not only would the entire city be in chaos, but it would also make the city easier to invade. Katata and Katafei were surrounded by a layer of fire like Saint Force as they flew through the sky. It took them another 50 meters before finally dropping to the ground, but still surrounded with the fire like Saint Force, they charged straight toward the Class 5 magical beasts. Fire Saint Force. That type of fire-like essence, that's something only an Earth Saint Master with a profound mastery of the Fire Saint Force can accomplish. Earth Saint Master, so there were experts like that here? To think that there would be an Earth Saint Master here. Damn it all, who gives two fucks about a Class 5 magical beast then? We have two Earth Saint Master experts on our sides. Brothers, forward. Kill those bastards and take revenge for our dead. Upon seeing the layer of fire surrounding Kat-Ata and Katafiai, many of the mercenaries were overjoyed and shouted out in disbelief. Their presence was almost like a tranquilizer to the men who had been frightened at the sight of those Class 5 magical beasts. Only a small amount of the mercenaries still had a look of worry on their faces. Magical beasts had an innate superiority compared to humanity. If there were 3 Class 5 magical beasts, then what could 2 Earth Saint Masters do? Let me handle the Golden Fur Tiger King. Jian Chen exclaimed as he flew toward the 2 brothers with no hesitation. His light wind sword was ready at his side as he flew at the 3 Class 5 magical beasts with blinding speed. Almost as if he were gliding across the ground, Jian Chen had instantly cut apart any magical beasts in his way with the azure and violet glows from his sword, making his path all but unhindered. At this moment, the azure and violet glow on the light wind sword made it seem like a sharp spear that was capable of destroying any defense and killing anything. Even the countless waves of magical beasts were utterly incapable of stopping Jian Chen for even a moment. It was almost as if Jian Chen was a godlike being right now, with power that was unmatched by anything. Even more so, it was like he could kill with just a lift of his finger and will. Kat-Ata and his brother had already been close enough to the Class 5 magical beasts with their Fire Saint Force surrounding their bodies to begin attacking. With each strike they made, the 3 Class 5 magical beasts retaliated. Their battles had already deformed the area around them beyond recognition. Their fighting energy had been splashed about in ripples of energy that flew everywhere and shook the earth. With each attack the energy grew bigger and bigger in intensity. Ho! The green-scaled ape roared angrily as a human's chest-sized fist came gleaming down with a green color onto Kat-Ata with a terrifying amount of force. Kat-Ata threw himself out of the way in order to dodge the fist. With a loud bang, the fist landed on the ground where Kat-Ata had just been. A large amount of energy rippled across the ground, and when the fist was lifted, there was a 3-meter deep and 5-meter long crater below. On one side, the bladed crocodile spat out a gray-colored ball of energy toward Katafiai while simultaneously readying its bladed spine. Leveling it horizontally to the ground, the spine suddenly flew at Katafiai with blinding speed. A glimpse of golden fur could be seen as the Golden Fur Tiger King let out an ear-piercing roar. Its claws, which were strong enough to shatter rock and split metal, flashed dangerously as they swiped at Katafiai while a foul smell of blood could be smelled as it also tried to bite him. Katafiai and Kat-Ata didn't dare defend head-on with any of the strikes from the 3 Class 5 magical beasts. The both of them knew that they were definitely not an opponent for any of the 3 magical beasts, and so it was not possible for them to win at all if they tried to go head-to-head. It would also consume their Saint Force rapidly and make escaping difficult. All they wanted to do was stall for time and gather the attention of the magical beasts. It was at this moment that Jian Chen had finally arrived with his eyes burning with a furious anger. Staring at the golden mane of the Golden Fur Tiger King, his light wind sword began to increase with respect to the luster of the azure and violet glow, but the presence of the sword spirits had not yet been revealed. No one would have expected to see that the azure and violet glows on Jian Chen's sword contained a terrifying amount of power. Disappearing in a blur, Jian Chen flew at the Golden Fur Tiger King who was in the midst of attacking Katafiai. His eyes locked onto the throat of the Golden Fur Tiger King and his light wind sword blazed with the azure and violet light as it flew toward the magical beast. Although it had sensed Jian Chen's attack, the Class 5 magical beast had some innate knowledge that told it that Jian Chen was only at the Great Saint Master level. To the Golden Fur Tiger King, Jian Chen was nothing more than an ant, so it didn't care for him. The tail behind casually flicked out to strike at Jian Chen with a speed that whistled through the air. The power in the tail was incredibly large, and even against a great Saint Master, the Saint weapon would surely break apart if it was hit by this tail. Suddenly, the tail of the Golden Fur Tiger King made contact with the layer of azure and violet glow of light and was effortlessly cut in two. However, the part that had been cut off resumed its trajectory path due to inertia and hit Jian Chen in the arm, which consequently forced Jian Chen's sword arm to aim down from the tiger's neck. Ho! The Golden Fur Tiger King let out an ear-splitting shriek of pain to the point where both the envoys and Jian Chen thought their eardrums would shatter. It's just like last time. Seeing how tall the Golden Fur Tiger King was right in front of him, Jian Chen's eyes flashed dangerously as he tried to change the trajectory to its original path. The light wind sword speared into the Golden Fur Tiger King's neck, causing the tiger to roar out miserably once more. Immediately, the head of the Golden Fur Tiger King spun through the air, leaking blood. At the same time, a fountain of blood splurted from its beheaded corpse 2 meters high into the air before falling back down to the earth. The Class 5 Golden Fur Tiger King had been beheaded in a single strike. Chapter 247, Punishing the Bladed Crocodile. The Golden Fur Tiger King's head spun through the air, raining blood down from the sky while the body below slowly crashed to the ground. The neck of the tiger began to pour blood in such large quantities that it filled the area around it. Katata and Katafii stared at the spinning head of the tiger in such shock that they had forgotten that they were in the midst of battle. All they could do was stare in absolute disbelief as their eyes continued to widen. The Class 5 Golden Fur Tiger King was something that neither of the two brothers would be able to kill by themselves. To think that Jian Chen had simply cut off its head with ease, this was too much of a shock for their hearts to handle. Even the green-scaled ape and the bladed crocodile stopped their actions mid-flight and turned to look at the severed head of the Golden Fur Tiger King with eyes that betrayed their shock. Not even waiting for the head of the Golden Fur Tiger King to fall to the ground, Jian Chen immediately landed near the bladed crocodile. While the magical beast was still stunned, the enhanced light wind sword immediately flew toward its skull. Sensing the incoming danger, the bladed crocodile immediately snapped out of its confusion and swung its 7-bladed spine at Jian Chen. A large ear-piercing sound could be heard as the spine whistled toward Jian Chen's sword while simultaneously tilting its head to the side faster than Jian Chen's movement. A layer of earth began to cover its head, resembling the color and sheen of steel armor, protecting its head. Ding! A single blade on the spine struck against the light wind sword with a crisp sound as a jolting shock was transmitted up into Jian Chen's arm. The light wind sword had almost been knocked out of Jian Chen's arm, but he managed to keep hold. The bladed spine, on the other hand, even though it was a brief moment of contact between the blade and the azure and violet light on the sword managed to leave a small crack on one of the blades. PCH. A few of the blades flew past Jian Chen's sword, one of them had even managed to burrow its way into Jian Chen's chest before protruding out of his back. In an instant, Jian Chen's face had become deathly pale as blood splurted out from his mouth. The blade had carried about a tremendous amount of power, and so when it had stabbed into him, the force was almost as if a wild horse had rammed against him, causing significant damage to his body. Because of Jian Chen's cultivation method, his inner organs were stronger than usual. Trying his best to ignore the blossoming pain in his chest, he bit his lip and slammed down into the bladed crocodile with his sword. The bladed crocodile flew back and spat out a large ball of energy at Jian Chen. Thanks to the innate knowledge it had, it immediately sensed that Jian Chen's sword was not to be met head-on with after seeing what had happened with the Golden Fur Tiger King. "Help me distract it." Seeing the bladed crocodile retreat, Jian Chen cried out loudly. At the same time, he moved to dodge the ball of energy before flying at the bladed crocodile. A figure came into view as Katafii flew into Jian Chen's line of sight. Enwrapping his saint weapon with the fire-like essence that was his saint force, he sliced down into the ball of energy. Bang! The ball of energy that had been spat out from the bladed crocodile had been cut in half by Katafiai's sword. The massive amount of energy from the ball immediately dispersed into the air before kicking up the dust from the ground and obscuring Katafiai, Jianchen, and the bladed crocodile from view. Katafiai filled the air around him with the light from his fire-like essence as he moved forward at an extremely fast pace. Despite the dust completely obstructing his visibility, it did not restrict his movements. The flame-like light would flicker brightly at times. When Katafiai swung his sword with his entire might, the dust around his sword seemed to have evaporated because of his fire saint force. As the dust cleared away, Jianchen could only see Katafiai send the bladed crocodile's body into the air. Its body was so big that it managed to cover a large part of the sky while its bodily defenses had been split in two with blood pouring out. Flickering away from sight, Jianchen quickly soared into the air. Before the bladed crocodile could even fall back down to the ground, Jianchen's light wind sword gleamed with an azure and violet light as he stabbed at its skull at an incredibly fast rate. The audience could only see the bladed crocodile fly through the air with its blood spilling in the air, and then Jianchen came out of nowhere and rendered its head into ground meat. With the azure and violet glows, the bladed crocodile's defenses had been nothing more than tofu, and it had instantly folded against the light wind sword. The gigantic body of the bladed crocodile finally fell to the ground without moving. Its own head had been split apart into multiple pieces as blood and brain matter began to spill out from the various sword wounds on its head. Bang! Not too far away, Katata had been hit by the green-scaled ape, causing him to be sent flying backward like a speeding bullet through the air while spitting out blood. The green-scaled ape turned to look at the splattered bladed crocodile with an ominous glint in its eyes. Turning its head to the sky, it let out a roar of sorrow before grabbing a 30-meter-long tree to swing at Jianchen. Jianchen didn't bother to move. Instead, the light wind sword enshrouded the area with a bright glow of light before instantly shaving away the tree into wood shavings. Immediately, Jianchen flew at the green-scaled ape with his light wind sword aimed at its throat. Howling angrily, the green-scaled ape lashed out with its foot to kick Jianchen away. Ugh! Jianchen spat out another mouthful of blood as he was sent flying back due to the kick. His face paled in color as he got up from the ground 30 meters away from his initial position. His chest had sunken in on itself in a terrifying way thanks to the absolutely inconceivably strong amount of force behind the ape's kick. Even the bones within his body had been crushed and his inner organs had suffered significant damage as well. The green-scaled ape stared at Jianchen with a death glare before charging straight for him. With each step, the floor trembled with shock to signify just how strong this beast was. At this moment, an intense amount of sword chi with a flame-like essence flew at the green-scaled ape. Right behind the sword chi was Katafiai with his sword. Without even looking at the red sword chi, the green-scaled ape swatted away the flame-like sword chi and forced it to dissipate into nothingness. Because of how Jianchen had killed 2 Class 5 magical beasts almost by himself, the green-scaled ape was forced to focus on him the most. Katafiai's face hardened as he looked on from far away. Seeing how Jianchen was struggling to get up, his face paled as he realized the green-scaled ape would reach him in no time. Katafiai, the strength of the green-scaled ape should be that of a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master. Its strength is too massive to go head-to-head, so just try to stall for time. Katata's weak-sounding voice called out. Chapter 248, heavily injuring the ape. A surge of fire saint force rippled out from Katafiai's body as it formed a faint shield around him, making it seem as if the god of fire had just descended. The green-scaled ape still paid no attention to Katafiai. Both of its eyes were focused on Jianchen with a bloodthirsty and malicious glare as if it had a deep grudge against him. Wincing from the pain in his chest, Jianchen staggered up from the ground. The bones in his chest had already fractured and some pieces had even started to stab into his inner flesh, causing him to feel so much pain that a thick blanket of sweat could be seen on his forehead. Watching the green-scaled ape come running at him, Jian Chen's face grew solemn. He knew that the 3 Class 5 magical beasts were on friendly terms with each other, so when he had killed 2 of the 3, the green-scaled ape would definitely come running at him. Upon seeing how the green-scaled ape had essentially ignored him, Katafei growled under his breath as another explosion of fire essence came out from him before forming a 3-meter-long blade. Cloud Fire Blade. With a loud shout, the floating red blade above his head immediately flew through the air like a shooting star with the green-scaled ape as its destination. It was then that the green-scaled ape finally halted its movement. Snarling angrily, it raised a fist to smash apart the Cloud Fire Blade. Straight away, the Cloud Fire Blade was smashed into pieces from the ape's fist. The energy splashed all over the area and filled the sky with its heat before incinerating any nearby plant life into ashes. Upon the disappearance of the flame, Katafei's body fell from the sky like a kite without a string. His body fell 20 meters from the sky before finally crashing down to the ground with an extremely pale face. The green-scaled ape's body shook slightly as it looked at the wound on its fist. The scales on that part of the fist had been obliterated and a green liquid began to drip down slowly from its fist to the ground. Ho! Roaring angrily once more, it raised a fist to strike at the grounded Katafei. With this, it had finally changed targets from Jian Chen to Katafei and moved closer to him. An injury by Katafei would not be excused by the ape. Cloud Fire Blade. Just as the green-scaled ape was completely focused on Katafei, Katata suddenly rose up into the air and slashed at the green-scaled ape with another Cloud Fire Blade. As soon as the Cloud Fire Blade made contact, the green-scaled ape's shoulder immediately began to bleed. What a strong defense! Katata cried out. The defense of the green-scaled ape was far beyond what he had expected. To think that even after using his entire strength, there would only be a small amount of damage. Suddenly a large palm came toward Katata to smack him down. Borrowing the body of the green-scaled ape, Katata kicked off from the ape in order to dodge the strike. With bloodthirsty eyes, the green-scaled ape swung toward Katata with an arm ready to strike Katata down from the air once more. Katata's face changed immediately. Since he was in midair, he had no way of moving, and so with the green-scaled ape's fist, there was no way of dodging it. Katata let out a loud shout as a large amount of fire saint force exploded from his body. In an instant it covered his entire body before using his saint weapon to slash at the green-scaled ape's fist. The green-scaled ape wasn't afraid and the fist continued to move in a fluid motion to swat Katata. A layer of green scales immediately came close to hitting him. Katata's sword was knocked aside from the force of the green-scaled ape's fist before landing fiercely onto his body. With a bone-breaking sound, Katata's body was sent flying with blood coming out from his mouth. At the same time, Jian Chen resisted the great feeling of pain within his chest and soared toward the ape. With the light wind sword flashing dangerously, he stabbed at the throat of the green-scaled ape. The green-scaled ape suddenly turned its head to look straight Jian Chen. Despite the sword coming at it, he didn't move to dodge the sword and instead lifted a giant hand to swat at Jian Chen. The ape had complete confidence in its defenses. If 2 Earth Saint Masters weren't able to cause any major sort of damage on it, then a great Saint Master like Jian Chen wouldn't even land a scratch. PCH. For a brief moment, the light wind sword was stopped by the defensive scales on the ape's neck. Then, the azure and violet glows on the light wind sword instantly cut through the scales like a hot knife through butter and the blade was inserted deep within its throat. Pa! Almost at the same time, the green-scaled ape's palm slammed against Jian Chen's chest with an unbelievable amount of force, causing some of his inner organs to rupture. Flying away from the fist, Jian Chen began to vomit blood as he felt excruciating pain in his body. Ho! After a fatal blow to the throat, the green-scaled ape cried out angrily toward the heavens, causing the group of magical beasts around it to shiver in extreme fear. From far away, the mercenaries all stopped what they were doing and slowly turned to look at the green-scaled ape. Each one of them knew that whether Wake City could be saved or even if they could survive, depended on this one battle. Not only was this battle determining Wake City's future, but also whether or not the entire group of humans there would live or die. Green liquid slowly dripped down from the throat of the green-scaled ape in an endless stream. Despite it slowly losing its life, its eyes carried a malicious and dangerous glare as it strode toward Jian Chen. At that moment, another 2 streaks of red light flashed as Cat Ada and Katafii charged toward the green-scaled ape. The both of them knew what had to be done. With the Golden Fur Tiger King and Bladed Crocodile dead, the 2 of them could do what they had initially planned on, killing the Class 5 magical beast. Brother Jian Chen, while we stall the green-scaled ape, find an opportunity to kill the beast. Cat Ada cried out from his position. Despite the 2 of them suffering from heavy wounds themselves, they could both manage to stall for time if they worked together. Furthermore, the green-scaled ape itself had suffered serious wounds on its neck. Despite it not dying straight away, its strength would surely be less than before. Katafii and Cat Ada continued to fight the green-scaled ape and were periodically sent flying backwards at least 3 times. The 2 of them were suffering from grave wounds, but finally, Jian Chen had found an opportunity and with one final leap toward the green-scaled ape, he slammed his sword into its head with sword chi enforcing it for a stronger effect. The green-scaled ape's gigantic body began to shake slowly. With a tiny wobble, it finally came crashing down to the ground. As for Jian Chen, with no more energy left in his body, he fell to the ground unconscious as well. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.